important for us to attract guests to the forum, not scare them away or badger them.
You know, part of it is here that when people participate in forums, and it gives a person a measure of anonymity, even if you know their real name, and they feel that they can say things they will not say in a public surrounding. But this is private because it's between them and the computer. They don't realize that when you post a message online in someone's forum, in a blog, hundreds, thousands, millions of people may read what you have to say. I think you see situations, for example, where criminals post what they're doing in Facebook and wonder why the police caught them.
Well, I mean, come on. That's about as stupid as you can get. I mean, can you spell idiot?
But I think the key here is the awareness of what you're doing and taking advantage of the so-called privacy to basically become another person. I mean, I've known people who have been really nasty in the forums, but you talk to them on the phone or something, and they're very nice. I won't mention one particular person who did a lot of snide personal attacks against me and has done it with Chris, and he's no longer in the forums, therefore he isn't mentioned. But the key is here, if you talk to the guy on the phone, he's really a pleasant guy, pleasant gentleman.
Yeah, pussycat.
Real pussycat. But as soon as he gets into the forums, it's like he becomes Mr. Hyde.
No.
There's something about being in a forum where your inner hate. Is that what it is?
Well, I think a good word would be emboldened.
Is that part of the online world that's the bad part? I know in the UFO field, there's no difference because people were debating and yelling at each other with personal letters, with newsletters. They'd attack each other. So now they simply take it online. So all that flame, all that vitriol becomes an online phenomenon, but it's already been here.
No. Well, that kind of brings to mind an interesting conundrum that the UFO field might have to endure here, and that is the loss of Jim Moseley and Saucer Smear. We need a new Saucer Smear. We need a UFO Tattler so people can get their yayas out for their own particular audience, and we can take the high ground for discussions on shows like this where we're attempting to educate people and attract interest in a field that's dying on the vine. And I think getting caught up in the definition of terminology and, well, you said this, which means this. I said this, which means that. This tit for tat thing just doesn't work. It doesn't. It's not fruitful for, expansive dialogue, for sharing points of view, for educating people. Ted Rowe is doing a thankless job along with quite a number of other people over at NARCAP. And I think we need to acknowledge the job that they're doing and get past our little pet peeves about how certain terms are used. I don't care if it's UAP, AAO, UFO. Actually, I do care. If it's UFO, it's toxic. It turns people off who are not directly involved in this phenomenon. And to be an apologist or somehow an unelected representative for a particular term is, I think, a little presumptuous. And, we need to get beyond that. We need to establish commonality, grounds that we can all agree on and move forward instead of all this getting caught up in minutia stuff, Gene. It's not productive.
I know the personalities always reign supreme. Like if you look up my name and you look up the nasty stuff, people say all sorts of horrible things about me. They say horrible things about, of course, Chris. About me, there's a matter of fact.
Wait a minute. Hold on. Time out. Go ahead. Find nasty stuff that people say about me online. And a pristine level of credibility and level of, how would I put this, respect.
Well, you know what? I think the one about you speaking with marbles in your mouth or chewing tobacco or something. I don't know. That was pretty crazy. But here's the thing. There's also a photograph of me that somebody made a composite in Photoshop. And they did something to my face that I can't even conceive. and they put a suit on me. Now, as Chris knows, I never wear a suit. So somebody felt that they can attack me more if they have me wearing a suit. So I don't know. Maybe they watch that TV show Suits too often. Oh, well. Let's try talk sense here. But maybe one thing we could consider here is maybe on the Paracast we should consider not using UFOs, but then we'd have to educate every guest who wants to use that term. So maybe that doesn't work. I don't know. Speaking of UFOs, we're back to UFOs this week. And we have Kevin Randall, who's a longtime UFO investigator focused on Roswell and a lot of other cases. In fact, on his blog, he writes about MJ-12 this week. I'm going to ask him about that. But he has a new book out called The Government UFO Files, The Conspiracy of Cover-Up. Oh, yeah?
This will be fun.
Now, things have changed in our world from the way it used to be. And that is, at one time, we actually believed the government maybe knew what they were doing. And they were competent, even if they were maybe keeping UFO information a secret. But now we see the government is totally incompetent. You know, we look at the controversy over, for example, the VA. And of course, Kevin is a veteran. So certainly he has lots of insights into that. And we wonder here, this is what I wonder, if the government's so incompetent, how do they keep the secret of UFOs a secret for over 60 years? Lots of questions to ask. The Government UFO Files is the book. Kevin Randall's the author. With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
First came Attack of the Rockoids, and it was a critically acclaimed success. And now there's The Coming of the Protectors. A former military intelligence man is contacted by a space woman in a dream that turns out to be a nightmare, because evil forces on our distant planet are planning to conquer the Earth. This is gripping science fiction of the classic kind. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Find out more at rockoids.com. That's Rockoids, ROCKOIDS.com.
So here's what happened. I was placing an order online. The site went down. It took hours before it returned, but I'd already placed the order with another company. If your site goes down, you could lose business. And if you have a business or personal site, you'll want to know it's easy to run and it will stay online. At iWeb, your site is hosted on one of the most reliable networks in the world. Talk to a sales rep at iWeb.com. Use the promo code TechNightOwl for a special discount.
Hi, John Hubner from Midas Resources. Are you tired of watching your hard-earned assets dwindle away? As government spending is out of hand and the Federal Reserve is creating in excess of $20 billion a week, are you tired of stockbrokers gambling away your hard-earned money? Is this market a setup for a crash greater than 1987? Too many of today's policies resemble those that led to the collapse of 1929. This is John Hubner, and that was me in 2007. And we all know what happened when the subprime credit bubble burst. By March 2009, the dollar lost 50% of its value. The entire U.S. banking system was on the verge of collapsing. Like all financial problems of the past, is history about to repeat itself? Call me, John Hubner, at 1-800-686-2237, extension 129, before it's too late to protect yourself. Will the oncoming catastrophe take all private IRAs, 401ks with it? There is a way to protect your hard-earned assets. Call me, John Hubner, at 1-800-686-2237, extension 129.
Moms of America, stand up and stop taking abuse from your kids.
I pledge never to let my kid disrespect me ever again.
I pledge to stop letting my daughter walk all over me.
I pledge to stop living in fear of my son's anger.
I pledge never to feel like a bad parent ever again. Because I'm not.
I pledge to stop letting my child's behavior control my home.
I pledge to be a mom with kids who listen, a total transformation mom.
I'm Janet Lehman, co-creator of the Total Transformation Program. We created the Total Transformation to help parents with difficult child behavior. Now I'm giving it away free. All you need to do is get the program and let us know how it works for you. We'll let you keep it for free.
Call 1-800-256-7795. That's 1-800-256-7795. Call now. Call 1-800-256-7795. That's 1-800-256-7795.
Question: Could too many GMO foods and toxins be overloading your digestive and immune systems? Answer, yes. If you're searching for a powerful detox that's gentle enough to use every day, use Pro EM1 from Terraganics. Pro EM1 is a powerful liquid probiotic that uses good bacteria to suppress pathogens and gently eliminate toxins from your body. A healthy digestive system will cleanse and remove toxins, support weight loss, improve absorption of food nutrients, and aid in controlling yeast and other infections. Pro EM1 is made with only non-GMO and certified organic ingredients, has no preservatives, and is dairy, soy, wheat, and gluten-free. Pro EM1 is the key to your digestive health. Order Pro EM1 Daily Probiotic Cleanse at Terraganics.com, spelled Terraganix.com, or call toll-free 866-369-3678. That's 866-369-3678. Also available through Amazon Prime. Pro EM1 from Terraganics. Life's getting better.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
I'm very happy to introduce an old friend back again with his latest book. Boy, he just keeps turning them out. You know, not as many as Nick Redfern, or actually totally, maybe he's written more over the years, but his latest, Kevin Randle's book, is The Government UFO Files, The Conspiracy of Cover-Up. And before we go on, let me just ask you a question, Kevin. More and more now, we're seeing how incompetent the government is. And as a veteran, you understand this with the VA and all the problems in terms of health care for veterans. So when we look at the problems they're having, how can we expect the government to be able to keep a secret about UFO reality for over 60 years?
But they haven't kept the secret. We keep talking about it. We keep finding documents. And just to plug the book, the whole premise is I was able to find lots of documentation that leads us from the Foo Fighters to the Ghost Rockets to the flying discs of 1947 to comments made by government officials about UFOs in the 1950s. There's a thread that connects it all together, and I was able to find it through government files and government documents, so the secret hasn't been kept. We just haven't put it all together, or the topic itself is now considered part of the lunatic fringe, no matter how serious you might be, and so you can't get the legitimate journalistic community to take a look at what you're doing because they're too smart to believe in alien visitation.
So they succeed by being incompetent.
Or in some cases, extremely competent by seeming incompetent.
Exactly.
I remember in the 1970s hearing about how incompetent the CIA was, and I got to thinking, what a brilliant cover for them. Everybody thinks they're a bunch of bungling idiots, and that is the kind of cover you'd want for a spy agency because nobody's going to take you seriously, and you can do all kinds of stuff that way. So
Yeah,
I think part of the incompetence may be a clever ruse to keep us looking elsewhere.
Yeah, and their new term for us now is the black helicopter crowd. I'm sure you appreciate that one.
And there's no evidence of the black helicopters. You know, I remember a woman saying that the black helicopters hovered over her house all the time, and she showed us pictures of them. And you'd see helicopters silhouetted against the sun, so they looked very dark, but you could see color. They weren't black helicopters, and it turned out there was a heliport like 3 miles from her house, so they weren't circling her looking for something. They were landing at the heliport.
So they were dark gray helicopters.
Or dark green helicopters, or maybe bright white ones silhouetted against the sun, so they look dark. Yeah,
any helicopter if you're underneath it, looking up against the blue sky, is going to appear silhouetted and dark.
Yeah. As a helicopter pilot, I understand how helicopters work and the missions they have and all of that sort of thing. So, and I know that you can hover at great altitudes in a helicopter if you so desire, but you have to be careful. But it's all... I think a lot of that comes from misperceptions and misidentifications, but it plays into a conspiracy that some people want to believe in. And once you play into that conspiracy, you get a lot of followers.
Well, since we're on the subject of helicopters, and you're being a helicopter pilot, you're a perfect person, I think, to ask this question of. I remember back in the late 90s, a McDonnell Douglas commercial that featured a silent helicopter, and it was very well done. I mean, obviously with video technology, you can suggest and kind of create any sort of scenario, but where do you come down on noise cancellation technology? I mean, what is the state of the art for silent helicopter technology?
There are some problems that you have, and it's the same thing you have with jet aircraft. The rotor blades are basically spinning very, very fast and can break the sound barrier. That creates sound. And as you're flying along, we used to do that if we were flying over a city where we knew somebody would be looking up at us, friends or family. We could make the blades pop, so that would call additional attention to us by loading up the blades and descending quickly, or all kinds of things we could do is make the blades pop. So you've got to cancel out the noise of the engine. You've got to cancel out the noise of the blades. And our technologies probably allow us to do a great deal of that sort of thing, so they're a lot quieter than they used to be. But most of the helicopters out flying around today wouldn't have that technology, and that would be a technology you'd want to use on covert missions and things like that, so the bad guys can't hear you coming. And that was one of the reasons in Vietnam we would fly at treetop level, because by the time the sound reached the bad guys, we'd already overflown them because we were so darn low and moving so fast. So there's all kinds of things going on there. But the technology for sound cancellation, we keep improving that so things get quieter and quieter. But there's the technology is still used very, very sparingly on I would think black operations and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult to cancel out prop noise. The sound of almost a hypersonic blade slicing through the air is going to create a sound.
Yes.
Regardless of the sound, and maybe it's overlooked, do we find situations frequently where people misidentify helicopters as possible UFOs?
Well, if we believe the Air Force, yes, we do. And I think specifically of the Loring Air Force Base cases, which coincidentally is covered in the book. But the Air Force decided, because some of the witnesses on the ground reported the object hovering, that it must in fact be a helicopter. And so you've got Air Force personnel who were within 100 yards of the thing reporting it hovering, but they couldn't identify it as a helicopter. It's over the weapons storage facility at Loring Air Force Base, which means it's in violation of federal regulations. The Air Force would have been justified in shooting at it, knocking it down, but none of that takes place. So when you look at the investigation, the Air Force doesn't call it UFOs or anything like that. It says unidentified helicopters who have penetrated our airspace, yet there's no evidence that they followed up on it to find out who these guys were violating the law, which is something you would think the Air Force would do if it was a helicopter hovering over their installation. So, by looking at the files, the government...
No, we see that in Malmstrom.
More so at Loring, because because they put out a document that's talked about the unidentified helicopters, and of course Phil Klass and everybody says, well, it was a helicopter, and here's the report the Air Force filed on it. Yet it doesn't make any sense because the lighting doesn't work. The guys were close enough to see it as a helicopter if it was. They heard no noise. The helicopter was low enough it would have been hovering at what we call ground effect, which means the air is coming down through the rotor blades and fanning out along the ground, and that kind of keeps it up. But it's also blowing up a lot of dust and debris, and there's no evidence of that either. The guys didn't talk about any of that sort of thing. So the idea that it was a low-flying helicopter is preposterous. And Klass said, well, I found these guys who were flying a helicopter some 3 weeks afterwards in a location 120 miles away. Well, yeah, that explains the case then, Phil. That was where the skeptics went. Well, it was a helicopter. They said so, and we're done with it. That's what the Air Force explanation was. Well, it clearly was not.
Well, a lot of it also is the noise factor. You can't have the silent helicopter, as you mentioned before. The book is called The Government UFO Files, and the guy responsible is Kevin D. Randall, and so much more to come. I'm Gene Steinberg with Chris O'Brien. You're in
the Paracast.
We are the premier independent talk radio network, the Genesis Communications Network, GCN.
Is there a secret UFO agenda? Do strange creatures from the darkest corners of the mind roam the Earth? Is there evidence for mind control, time travel, or devious government conspiracies? Find out the inside scoop on the latest conspiracies, paranormal activity, and Fortean phenomena when you subscribe to Tim Beckley's Conspiracy Journal. It's jam-packed with stories, special book and DVD promotions, and the best news, it's absolutely free, sent right to your mailbox. Plus, a bonus free email newsletter sent out every Friday. Simply send an email with your name and address to Mr. UFO at webtv.net. That's Mr. UFO at webtv.net. Find out what they don't want you to know.
We live in a complicated society. Stressful issues are always popping up. Have you ever been treated unfairly by someone? Have you ever been overcharged for a repair? Have you ever signed a contract or a document worried about identity theft? How many times have you been in those unique situations where you just wanted to call an attorney to find out if you're right or wrong, or what your legal rights are? But every time you think about calling an attorney, what do you think about first? That's right. Who do you call, and how much will it cost? Our friends at Legal Shield have found a solution. With a nationwide network of 6,900 attorneys who average 19 years of experience, Legal Shield's law firms take over 40,000 calls per week helping their members. For less than $20 per month, you can have access to Legal Shield on everything from the trivial to the traumatic. Let Legal Shield stand up for your rights at lsprotection.com. That's lsprotection.com. Or call 855-340-SAVE, 855-340-7283.
Results will vary from case to case.
At 30dayfoodsupply.com, you can now purchase a one-of-a-kind product not available anywhere else. A meatless burger dry mix in 4 delicious flavors. With our new Oregon Trail Foods vegan burgers, all you do is add water and fry. They need no refrigeration. They're packaged in Mylar bags with an oxygen absorber for a long shelf life. They're non-GMO. They're gluten, soy, nut, and chemical-free, but they're loaded with flavor. And a good source of carbs and protein, yet low in sodium. Flavors include Italian, spicy Mexican, 6 vegetable, and black bean olive. Go to 30dayfoodsupply.com or call 541-229-0010 and order today. Eat them every day, take them camping, or save them for an emergency. Check them out at 30dayfoodsupply.com and click on the vegan burger icon. That's 30dayfoodsupply.com, where all of our products are produced in Oregon by Oregon Trail Foods. 30dayfoodsupply.com.
The human body is extraordinary. Despite all the stresses we inflict upon it, it still works hard to stay in balance. Thousands upon thousands of people rely upon Heart and Body Extract to help their body stay balanced. This excellent 100% natural herbal formula helps maintain healthy blood pressure levels, cleans arteries, promotes good circulation, balances cholesterol, and more. HB Extract, paired with healthy lifestyle choices like good nutrition and exercise, can give you a life free of pain, sickness, and fear. Recapture your youthful vitality and experience your body healing itself with the aid of HB Extract. It's extremely effective and it starts working in just days. Visit hbextract.com to learn more and to read scores of testimonials from satisfied customers. And we've never increased our price in over 10 years. That makes Heart and Body Extract as great a value now as it was the first day we sold it. A healthy heart is a happy heart. Call 866-295-5305 or go to hbextract.com.
Hi, this is Don Ecker, and you are tuned into the Paracast. Let me tell you what, you're going to hear stuff here that you probably won't hear anywhere else. Hear that, George Snorri?
Gene and Chris on the Paracast. Kevin Randall rejoins us. We're always happy to have him back. He's got so much important to say. Now, earlier we were talking about...
Can I interrupt for just a minute? Because you mentioned Nick Redfern writing a lot of UFO books.
Yeah.
I will tell you the leader of publishing UFO books is either Brad Steiger or me. And Brad Steiger and I talk about this. We're not sure who it is, but we lead at the moment with Nick Redfern making a real run to catch up.
Well, he figures that he's younger than you guys. So he figures...
I think Brad Steiger's like 107.
I think he's 112 now. I haven't talked to him much lately, but I think he's 112. And he's done, 165 books overall?
some big number, but I remember reading one of his first books, Strangers from the Skies, when I was in high school.
Yeah, yeah.
So the guy's been writing UFO books since we were all kids.
50 years.
Yes, yes.
And then there's guys like me that write 600-page books that could be 4 of Nick's.
Well, there is that too, and the government files book is pretty thick. It's much longer than I think one of Nick's books. Which is not to say I don't enjoy Nick's books. I probably ought to plug Nick's books while I'm at it. I guess I read them too. So.
Well, he'll be on the show in 2 weeks, so you might as well.
Yeah,
but your book is
Encounters of the Fatal Kind is very good too.
But your book is 354 pages plus cover. It's a larger size than the normal book, a large trade paperback.
Yes.
And your text is pretty small.
Yes, so I have to read it with magnifying glass, being old and decrepit. No, I just made that up.
Okay. Well, now what's happened, of course, because we were talking about the blogosphere and about how people involved in UFO research are constantly attacked. And we figure now they'll think of that attack that you just created for yourself. They'll take your words out of context. But let's go back to...
Which words are they going to attack me for now, for crying in a bucket?
I don't know. Whatever you
I said
say.
Nick Redfern writes a lot of books, and I read them myself. He ought to be happy with that, and the blogosphere can have at it, I guess.
Oh, no. Now, boys, let's not get started here.
All in good fun. Let's go back to the black helicopters.
Okay.
So how did that thing get started? Is there a beginning of that black helicopter legend?
I blame Chris O'Brien. How's that? with the cattle mutilations in the 70s, they started with the helicopters.
Well, I blame Jim Keith for writing the first book. Black Helicopters Over America is the first real book to my knowledge.
Good, there we go. Well, back in the olden days when I was flying for the Iowa National Guard in the early 1970s, and there was a lot of cattle rustling going on, and we were a group, we had a formation of helicopters, and I forget what we were doing, and somebody called over the radio and says, you're not going to believe this, but we're taking fire. And, I mean, we were all Vietnam veterans, so we were used to that, and it was some farmer down there with a shotgun shooting at us because he thought we were trying to rustle cattle. And I said, well, we should return fire for fire received because we were flying gunships. Of course, we didn't have the guns and we didn't have any ammunition, so we couldn't return fire. But I thought that would be kind of fun.
Well, it happened. Actually, helicopters were reported firing back at ranchers, and a team on the ground in one incident actually joined in with the helicopter and started firing from a different position at the beleaguered rancher. And you mentioned Iowa in 72. I mean, you forget to mention that hundreds and hundreds of animals were being reported stolen in Russell.
Oh, yes. The ranchers were clearly, and farmers were clearly right in their paranoia about the rustling going on because it was, in fact, going on. But I will say this, unequivocally, the Iowa National Guard never fired back at the ranchers.
Well, yeah, and I would expect that would be the case. But you were flying at a little higher altitude for a while.
We, in Vietnam, we usually flew at 1,500 feet, which was basically 1,500 feet AGL above the ground, which was in small arms range, just outside of small arms range, but inside 50 caliber range. That was normally where we flew in between point A and point B, but if we were doing other stuff, we were getting much closer to the ground, too. So sometimes speed and terrain masking helped us out.
Yeah, it's tough to hide in Iowa.
It's not nearly as flat as you might think, and it's certainly not as bad as Nebraska.
Yeah, well, that's
try driving Interstate 80 across Nebraska someday.
Yeah, I've done it many times, and it takes half a day.
And it's really, really boring.
Especially back in the 80s when the speed limit was 55.
And you didn't have satellite radio so that you had to keep searching for radio stations to listen to.
Well, now that's why we had satellite radio for the truck drivers and the people driving across these barren desert landscapes.
Yes, yes. I won't even mention what is Interstate 70 between Grand Junction and Interstate 15 across Utah.
Well, it's been years since I hit the interstates in the Midwest. Let's move to other topics here.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
Okay, no more black helicopters. Ladies and gentlemen, there are no black helicopters except the one that I see right now, flying above my head. No, that's the ceiling, excuse me. But I got to fix those holes in the ceiling, you know. All right. Anyway, there's a piece you have over at your world famous blog, A Different Perspective, called MJ12 The Beginning. And you're referring here to an Open Minds article analyzing MJ12. And this has been one of those lingering controversies from the 1980s that never dies, that there was a secret agency called MJ12 involved in connection with UFOs. We have these documents unearthed by William Moore and others regarding MJ12. So what insights can you offer looking back at that in the 21st century?
Well, it's interesting you should mention that blog posting because I put it up like an hour and a half ago.
You see how fast we are here. We have a team of researchers called RSS. You know what that is. Go ahead.
Anyway, Alejandro Rojas had done a piece by attempting to FOIA information about MJ12 from the Air Force and various government agencies. And he was attempting to trace the beginnings, as some people may not have understood how it came about or what was going on. Some of the things that he mentioned in the piece were little-known facts about the Eisenhower briefing document, Richard Doty's role in it, his connection to Bill Moore, the attempts to push some of this information on Linda Moulton Howe, the attempts to push some of the information on Benowitz, who was a scientist living in the Albuquerque area at the time, who thought he was recording messages from outer space. Although I think the idea now is that he'd actually tapped into some kind of low frequency communications between various government agencies, military organizations, and so they were attempting to lead him astray in that, at least according to Doty. So Alejandro's in his article looks at all of that sort of thing, and bringing all of that sort of into perspective for those who may not have been that keyed into what the beginnings of MJ12. And what I did was I just added a couple of points I thought were important, one of which was Bill Moore saying to a number of researchers in 1980, 1981, that he'd run into this roadblock, this blank wall he couldn't break through on his Roswell research, and he was thinking about creating some kind of a Roswell document that would help him. The idea being, I guess, showing it to some reluctant witnesses to show that, yeah, we have this information, what do you make of it, or convincing other people to talk. And lo and behold, not too long after that, his friend Jamie Shandera receives the MJ12 documents on undeveloped 35 millimeter film. And the other thing that I found, Friedman told me that while we were in California. He now denies he said it, but there were other people who heard that story from more, bouncing the idea off them. So it's just not me saying that without any kind of corroborative evidence. That story is out there, and I put a couple of links up to other articles that mention the same sort of thing. One, unfortunately, linking to Phil Klass, which I hesitated to put up, but it just shows that information coming from other researchers as well.
Let's do the break here and we'll continue.
Okay.
With MJ12. Kevin Randall with Gene and with Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
We are America's largest independently owned communications network, GCN.
Attack of the Rockoids has been well received by critics and readers alike. It's a thrill-a-minute story you'll never forget. A former U.S. military intelligence officer is haunted by intense dreams about a beautiful woman pleading for his help after a terrible battle in outer space. But the dreams turn out to be true and thrust him into a telepathic love affair with a woman whose faraway planet is intent on destroying the Earth. And now the gripping tale continues in The Coming of the Protectors. It's the second book of the Rockoids trilogy, a galaxy-spanning adventure that pits our hapless heroes against powerful, fanatical enemies that threaten the lives of freedom-loving beings everywhere. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Classic science fiction at its best, available now. For more details, visit rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com.
Hey everyone, have you heard about the No Hair Removal device that's sweeping the globe? If you want to go weeks without shaving and get smooth, professional quality results, here's our favorite host, Cheryl, for No Hair Removal.
Thanks. Hey gals, I love talking about my No. It's this cute little hair removal system that you can take with you and use almost anywhere at home or on the road. No more expensive in-office treatments, painful waxing, and no more wasting your valuable time. Got unwanted facial hair? No has patented thermocon technology that works on all hair and skin colors, so it's perfect for using on all body parts. And now you can take advantage of this incredible risk-free trial. Get the No, the facial kit, a travel case, and a $100 discount shopping card, and you don't risk a penny to try it. Try the incredible No hair completely risk-free. Call 1-800-953-6062. That's 800-953-6062. 800-953-6062.
If you need to say happy birthday, happy anniversary, thank you, or simply I'm thinking of you, ProFlowers.com is the key. ProFlowers has stunning bouquets, like the best-selling 100 blooms for $19.99. Plus, ProFlowers will include a glass vase for free. Sending someone a wonderful surprise of beautiful flowers sent fresh from the fields is easy. Choose the bouquet you like, pick the delivery date, and each order is 100% guaranteed. Plus, all bouquets from ProFlowers are guaranteed to last at least 7 full days. Beautiful, fragrant flowers, picked fresh and sent to your loved one for lasting enjoyment. To get this incredible savings and send someone 100 gorgeous blooms with a free vase for $19.99, go to ProFlowers.com, click the blue microphone in the top right corner, and enter code PLOW. That's ProFlowers.com. Click the mic and enter code PLOW.
Ouch! My back is out again.
Hi, Dr. Ortman with Wellspring Spinal Care. If you're experiencing neck, mid, or lower back pain, this information is for you. One of the complaints that I hear is patients receive their typical adjustment, only having to repeat them as the pain returns. Putting the bones back in place is only half of the battle. At Wellspring Spinal Care, we have the entire solution. We use the NUCA approach, utilizing three-dimensional x-rays and gentle touch technology to deliver specific correction. We then design a custom nutritional supplement program which provides essential nutrients targeting the areas of concern. With a NUCA approach and proper nutrition, you'll be on your way to a faster and more permanent recovery. To get you on the road to wellness, visit drortman.com. That's drortman.com, or call us today, 952-303-9124. That's 952-303-9124. Wellspring Spinal Care, chiropractic done right.
This is Kurt Sotheby, author of UFO Mysteries, and you're listening to the Paracast.
Chris is now trying to sound like a roll of film, 35 millimeter film from the 1980s. Film, boy, those were the days. Kevin Randall is reacquainting us with the legend of MJ-12 that never goes away. Continue, please.
And I certainly wish it would. I think it should be a footnote to the history of UFOs, and we should move on from that. The other thing that's interesting is the story originally was broken by Timothy Good in Great Britain, and he had the documents. He went to a newspaper there, and they published them, and they show up in his book, Above Top Secret, which I think was a copyright date of 1988. But on the copies that he prints in his book, there's this chevron-like marking, three stripes, that floats on the pages. It shows up in various places on the pages, which suggest it's an artifact created by that specific copy machine as opposed to something that was on the original film. And interestingly enough, that same chevron shows up in copies that Bill Moore had. So Bill Moore's got the original documents, so he doesn't need a Xerox copy, but it's clear that the Xerox copies that Good had came from Moore, because Moore's copies, Xerox copies, have that same artifact in different locations. So it's a floating artifact. It's obviously from that specific copy, or it's a fingerprint. So we can trace all the MJ-12 documents back to Bill Moore, including those that Timothy Good had. So I mentioned that as sort of I guess additional information that Antonio Rojas had produced in his 30-minute piece on YouTube. about MJ-12 in the beginning. So we can look at this, and we see that it all relates back to Bill Moore and Jamie Shandry. And in fact, there was a document called the Aquarius Telex, and I think Antonio mentions this as well, which mentions MJ-12 on it. But what we learn by looking at that is it is a retyped version of an authentic document that came from the OSI. And Bill Moore admitted to Dick Hall that he retyped it. He said the copy he had was so poor you couldn't read it, so what he did was he retyped it and pasted on the heading so it would have the look of an official document. So we can trace a fake document, the Aquarius Telex, back to Bill Moore. And when I queried both Stan Friedman and Ryan Wood about the Aquarius Telex, they never answered my questions about it. I said, Friedman said that he doesn't even mention it in his book. And I'm thinking, here's the first document that ever was released into a public arena that mentions MJ-12, and it's a known hoax, and it's an admitted hoax, but we just sort of ignore that whole thing.
Okay, well, there's an obvious implication here, and let me just drop it by you, which is that if these things are fake, William Moore had some connection with that?
I think the evidence is becoming overwhelming that Bill Moore had some kind of connection with that. Bill Moore committed ufological suicide in 1989 at a conference in Las Vegas where he suggested he'd been working as part of a disinformation campaign to leak false information into the UFO community. And from that point on, he's been pretty well a pariah in the UFO field. But he also talks about, and there's good evidence from Barry Greenwood and Brad Sparks, that Moore, working with Bob Pratt, and Bob Pratt being an innocent bystander in this, were producing a book in 1980 that mentions MJ-12, that mentions this whole sort of thing. It was called, and the original title was Project Aquarius. So this is like 4 years before the documents show up in Jamie Shandera's mailbox, but it's more talking about this whole sort of thing using the same sort of terminology. The dating format goes right back to Bill Moore because it's an unusual dating format, but it shows up in the MJ-12 document. So I think it all links back to Bill Moore pretty clearly as the guy who created the documents, and created them because he thought it was a good idea at the time.
A good idea at the time. Maybe he thought he was bringing out his inner Gray Barker and Jim Moseley.
I don't know what. I can kind of understand it if you're trying to convince reluctant witnesses to talk to you, and you have a document that pretty well tells the story, that they might be more willing to speak about these secrets. Although those of us who are clever enough would know that wouldn't work on some people, but it would work on others.
You're being a little too kind there.
Well, when I was doing some research into the Washington Nationals, I think it was Al Chop, who was the Air Force liaison, civilian public affairs guy in the Pentagon in 1952, was telling me about the Washington Nationals and that one of the sightings had gotten pretty hairy. And I said, well, can you tell me about it? He said, I really can't. Well, Dewey Fournay, who was running the UFO desk in the Pentagon at the time, was in the same room with Chop when this all took place. So I was talking to Dewey Fournay, and I said, well, I was talking to Al Chop, and he talked about this one sighting that got pretty hairy, and Fournay told me all about it, because I had that one little piece of evidence or information I could share with him. Al Chop told me that one of the sightings got pretty hairy, and Dewey Fournay thought I knew everything, so he was just confirming the information. So, that sort of thing works. But creating a false document, what you end up risking is when it is exposed as being fraudulent, you've pretty well negated all the research that you've done up to that point, especially if you're the creator. If you've fallen for the document, not quite as deadly as having created the document yourself.
What bothers me also here is people like Stanton Friedman, who should know better, is still maintaining that at least some of these MJ-12 documents are genuine. Or has he changed?
No. And I pointed out to him that I think there's a fatal flaw in the Eisenhower briefing document, and it's this alleged crash that took place on December 6, 1950, according to the MJ-12 document, and it's based on the testimony of a guy who claimed to be an Air Force colonel and a fighter pilot, and I discovered the guy was probably not in the Air Force, was not a fighter pilot. His military experience was as a low-ranking enlisted man for about 13 months in the late 40s, but his military career was mainly made up of being in the Civil Air Patrol, which is a civilian organization. And so if that paragraph is bogus, based on this story that was made up in 1968, you've now negated the entire Eisenhower briefing document, because clearly it was something created long after 1952 when it was supposedly written. It was created sometime after 1968 when this guy started telling this bogus tale. The point was, Stan said to me I was probably right about the guy, but I was wrong about the MJ-12 document.
This is never going to end. I mean, you can't give a good hoax down. This is part of the problem in the UFO field now, why so many people call it toxic, which is that when you take a piece of information and you demonstrate for once and for all that piece of information has no reality to it. It's a fake. It's a composite, whatever. It never disappears. I was joking, for example, in the first part of the show before you came on, that there's a composite picture of me online. Somebody took my face and manipulated it. That didn't make me look bad. You know, maybe it looks better. Some people might think so. And because I don't wear a suit, they had me wearing a suit. They put a suit on me in Photoshop. Now, that picture will never be taken down. It's an obvious fake. And I could say to Google or anyone, hey, this is a fake picture of me, take it down. They're not going to do it.
Well, let's say Google says, okay, it's fake, we're going to take it down. Somebody else is going to post it somewhere else. And anytime you suggest someone's favorite case might be bogus, MJ-12, for example, suddenly you're not a researcher, you're a debunker.
Right.
and let's splash that mud all over. You're a debunker, therefore I'm not going to listen to anything you say, no matter what evidence you present showing that your analysis is accurate. You're a debunker. And there's one guy that chases me on Amazon, and no matter what book I publish, he always puts up a negative review. He gives it 1 star and a negative review, and it's clear he's reacting to 2 words, which is Kevin Randall on the book. He hasn't read the book. Apparently, I've offended him, and he believes that I'm nothing but a debunker, and so he always puts that in the reviews of the books. So, you know, there's really nothing you can do. And the other thing about the reviews on Amazon that cracked me up, they're anonymous. You don't have to put your name. You can create a fake name, and so I can say anything I want about anybody, and there's nothing you can do about it because I'm hidden behind this anonymous name I created.
Yes, but Amazon knows the name, and if you complain to Amazon, they will sometimes take it down. I've seen some really offensive reviews for some things I've written, and it's obvious it's a personal attack. They'll take it down. Because it's not fair to you or to anybody if somebody wants to buy a copy of a book and get a sense of it, like Chris wrote the book Stalking the Herd. And most people like it. I think he had only 1 negative review out of all of it, which is amazing. Because in this crazy world, in this polarized world, there are lots of different opinions. But some of these reviews, it is a game. And sometimes you can get them to take down the fake ones. Kevin Randall is talking about the government UFO files and other stuff with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
A little right, a little left, but always independent-minded. The Genesis Communications Network, GCN.
Henry Ford once said, a man who stops advertising to save money is like a man who stops a clock to save time. Alex Castle here, the National Account Executive at GCN. I have the ability to customize a national radio campaign based on your budget while targeting your demographic. Contact me to find out how national radio can help your business be more profitable at 877-996-4327, extension 177. That's 877-996-4327, extension 177, and help me help you bring your business to the next level.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. Have you ever wondered why banks, stockbrokers, investment advisors won't talk about gold IRAs? They've been available since 1986, yet the financial industry won't recognize the value of gold for your retirement. Gold has outperformed paper investments, yet no word about IRAs. If you would like to have gold for your retirement, call 800-686-2237. Don't get left behind by rising inflation and low returns. Call 800-686-2237. Secure your future and call 1-800-686-2237.
Springtime is save big time at Herbal Healer Academy. Long-term customers know spring is the time to stock up at herbalhealer.com. And for new customers, welcome to the web's best place to save on vitamins, minerals, and more. Log on for spring specials, including our 500 parts per million colloidal silver, all sizes on sale. Choose from Herbal Healer's great variety of weight loss products like apple cider vinegar, Hoodia and Metabolic Complex, and Pro Metabolic, all on sale now. Also, the Anti-Parasite Intestinal Freedom and Warwood Plus Complex, plus Stevia Liquid Sweetener and the Super Enzymes, all on sale for spring at herbalhealer.com. As always, we offer certificate correspondence courses in natural medicine. Enjoy same-day shipping and free online newsletter. Log on now to herbalhealer.com and click on Spring Specials to save big with our nation's leader in supplying quality natural medicine and education since 1988, Herbal Healer Academy.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
This is the Paracast. Kevin Randall joins us. We're always happy to have him on because he's a wealth of information. Now, in researching the government UFO files, did you find any particular cases or legends or anything that you thought may have been true, but this research showed otherwise?
Yeah, well, there's one that springs to mind immediately, and it's only because it's here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I was looking for stories of people reporting a disc-shaped object prior to Arnold in June 24th, 1947, because the skeptic argument is the idea of a disc-shaped, a flying saucer, came from a misunderstanding of what Arnold had said. He wasn't describing the shape of the objects, he was describing their motion as a saucer skipping across the pond. So the skeptical argument says everybody was seeing flying saucers, even though the objects hadn't been saucer-shaped. So I was looking for any stories that I could document prior to Arnold talking about disc-shaped. And if we go back further enough in history, we could do it. But there was a story in a number of places I found it about a railroad engineer in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, walking along and seeing 10 disc-shaped objects fly overhead, and it was published in the newspaper on June 23rd, the day before Arnold. I thought, this is a great story, and I looked at Dick Hall's UFO evidence, and it was in there, and it says June 23rd, and I found a couple of other places, and I could find some footnotes for it that led me back to 1956. But I couldn't find anything earlier that in the books. And I thought, I live in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I'll just go down and look at the newspaper files. So I went down to the library. I discovered there were actually two newspapers in Cedar Rapids at the time. One was a weekly and didn't publish on June 23rd, so that was pretty well out. And I was looking at the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and I read the entire June 23rd newspaper, and the story was not there. I couldn't find it. I found the Arnold story like 2 or 3 days later, and in the same newspaper with the Arnold story, I found a reference to the engineer story in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, except it wasn't Cedar Rapids. It was Joliet, Illinois. He didn't say anything about it until a couple of days after Arnold, so there was no documentation prior to it. And it was a single witness case. But looking at what I thought of as fairly good references, Dick Hall's UFO evidence, he hadn't chased it back to the ultimate source, which was the Cedar Rapids Gazette. I found the story. So that was one where the research took me, and I could do it because I lived in Cedar Rapids, and I could see that the story appeared in the newspaper, but it did not appear on June 23rd, which would have been a wonderful bit of evidence had we been able to corroborate it. So there were things like that went wrong. Doesn't mean the story wasn't true. It just means I couldn't hold it up as here's a story published in the newspaper prior to Arnold talking about a disc-shaped object. It was after Arnold talking about it. I believe it happened on the same day, and I think I know what happened. Is Frank Edwards thought that the day it happened was a day earlier. I mean, it was like on Wednesday, I think it was June 24th in 1947. And I think Edwards thought it happened on Tuesday, the day before, based on what the newspaper article said. And so he thought it was June 23rd and didn't realize that the paper had actually been published 3 or 4 days after Arnold. So that was one thing, and it's not a major discovery, but what it does is suggest we need to verify our information from the original sources as opposed to looking at other sources, other UFO books, where they don't document what the source came from. And early UFO books, as you know, they didn't bother with footnotes or any of that sort of thing. And I think Frank Edwards basically wrote from memory, and he didn't check his facts, so he got things slightly askew. But it doesn't mean the stories aren't true. It just means we need to follow them to the ultimate source, the original source, if we can do so.
Now, that's one thing I've noticed your last recent books, and that is that you take a story and you look at the source, and sometimes the story is sourced somewhere else. Somebody is quoting somebody who's quoting somebody. And sometimes the facts are fairly similar. Sometimes it's a completely different story. But I want to ask you that question then. In and around the time of the Arnold sighting, before or after, were there cases of UFOs seen in formation that were similar to what Arnold reported either before or after?
One of the things that I was looking for, there was a number of sightings that came out of Richmond, Virginia, in March of 1947. That case is not in Project Blue Book. There are a number of cases in Blue Book prior to Arnold. They were reported after Arnold, obviously, but the information was gathered after Arnold. Here's a case that was supposedly reported to the guy's superiors at the Weather Service prior to Arnold, and it's mentioned in various books. But the interesting thing is there's no case file in the Project Blue Book files. But if you go through the final report on Project Grudge, and you have to remember that the first original official investigation was Sign, which evolved into Grudge, which evolved into Blue Book. And at the end of Grudge, they produced a 400, 500-page document about UFO sightings. And this sighting from the Weather Service in Richmond, Virginia, is mentioned in the Grudge report. No case file, so you wonder where the case file went, what disappeared. But here would be a case where you've got stuff prior to Arnold talking about disc-shaped objects, but we can't find the case file because it was removed from Project Blue Book, which leads to another point, which is there's a guy named Howard McCoy, who was an intelligence officer at Wright Field in 1947. During World War II, he was an intelligence officer in Europe, and he's investigating the Foo Fighters. When you get to the ghost rockets from Sweden in 1946, you find this guy from the United States investigating the ghost rockets, and it's Howard McCoy. And he's gathering all this information about the ghost rockets. In December of 1946, McCoy is told to set up an unofficial investigation of these things, these strange aerial phenomenon, and it's based in a single room at Wright Field. The room is locked. He and 2-3 other guys have access to it, but they're gathering all this information, including the ghost rocket stuff. When Arnold sighting happens and they start the official investigations, all that information that they gathered prior to Arnold now disappears. There's virtually nothing about the ghost rockets in the Project Blue Book files, but there should be because the information was gathered. So where'd all that information go?
Yeah, really. Well, Jimmy Doolittle also went over there and investigated the ghost rockets, if I remember correctly.
Yes, but see, Jimmy Doolittle was involved in the ghost rockets, but not in Project Sign and not in Project Grudge, nor was he involved with the Foo Fighters. The guy who was involved in all of that was Howard McCoy. So you've got a guy in World War II. They're looking at this very seriously because they're worried about it being some kind of an enemy anti-aircraft development. You know, they don't know whose it is. They don't know what's going on, but they're looking at it. When the war ends, nobody cares anymore because the war is over, and they find out that the Germans had the same concerns with the Foo Fighters. They were seen in the Pacific Theater, and the Japanese had the same concerns about the Foo Fighters, but the guy involved in all of that was Howard McCoy. So when you start with the ghost rockets, which everybody thought was some kind of a Soviet political attempt to intimidate the Swedes, for example, or the Scandinavians, and we find out now that, of course, that isn't true, but the guy investigating is Howard McCoy. So now the guy is involved in Foo Fighters and Ghost Rockets, and then the early flying disc stuff before Arnold. They're investigating these things in the United States. All that information has basically disappeared. So McCoy had it, and you wonder what happened to it. But McCoy is involved in that. And then when we get to the estimate of the situation that spawned Twining's letter that said the phenomenon is something real and not illusionary and fictitious, and then, of course, mentions there was no crash-recovered debris, which everybody thinks rules out Roswell. But the thing is, who wrote the letter? Howard McCoy. He wrote it in response to the specific information that was handed to them. It was like 16 or 18 cases for this small estimate of the situation, and he writes the letter that sets up Project Sign. It's Howard McCoy who does that. He's a string that connects all this stuff together and shows how we were led down the path to where we are today.
So basically, there is no record that you can access of similar sightings ahead of Arnold's.
There is some stuff. It's much earlier. There's some Foo Fighter stuff. You have to remember the Foo Fighters were basically balls of light that they saw, but there are some very good sightings where they were disc-shaped objects. And in fact, Len Stringfield, in 1945, he was on a flight from Iwo Jima to Japan in September of 1945, right after the war ended. I mean, it's been over for like days, and we're sending American soldiers into Japan now to set all of that stuff up. He's on an aircraft from Iwo Jima to Japan.
Let's go more into that in the next segment. We have a hard break coming up, and I certainly don't want to interrupt this any further. We have so much ground to cover. We have Kevin Randall joining Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Do you need a website? Well, you can get a great deal on hosting services with Namecheap's legendary coupon code. They're offering substantial hosting discounts on shared hosting, business hosting, VPS hosting, reseller hosting, and even dedicated servers. Namecheap is preferred by millions. It's backed by a money-back guarantee. Use the coupon code LEGENDARY to cash in on the special deal at Namecheap.com, Namecheap.com.
First came Attack of the Rockoids, and it was a critically acclaimed success. And now there's The Coming of the Protectors. A former military intelligence man is contacted by a space woman in a dream that turns out to be a nightmare because evil forces on her distant planet are planning to conquer the Earth. This is gripping science fiction of the classic kind. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Find out more at rockoids.com. That's rockoids, ROCKOIDS.com.
Hi, John Hubner from Midas Resources. Are you tired of watching your hard-earned assets dwindle away? As government spending is out of hand and the Federal Reserve is creating in excess of $20 billion a week, are you tired of stockbrokers gambling away your hard-earned money? Is this market a setup for a crash greater than 1987? Too many of today's policies resemble those that led to the collapse of 1929. This is John Hubner, and that was me in 2007. And we all know what happened when the subprime credit bubble burst. By March 2009, the dollar lost 50% of its value. The entire U.S. banking system was on the verge of collapsing. Like all financial problems of the past, is history about to repeat itself? Call me, John Hubner, at 1-800-686-2237, extension 129, before it's too late to protect yourself. Will the oncoming catastrophe take all private IRAs, 401ks with it? There is a way to protect your hard-earned assets. Call me, John Hubner, at 1-800-686-2237, extension 129.
For over 5 years, you've been hearing about the Berkey Guy, so you may know a few things about him. For example, you are well aware of the superior quality and effectiveness of Berkey water filters and accessories. But did you know the Berkeys have had independent lab tests done to prove just how effective they are? It's true, and he can email you the test results. Just visit GoBerkey.com. You may also know that the Berkey Guy has helped tens of thousands of people get better prepared. Now here's something you may not know. GoBerkey.com has amazing specials and deals all the time on a wide variety of survival and preparedness products. Most ready to ship same day. Visit the Berkey Guy at GoBerkey.com and be sure to click the red Products on Sale Now button. You can always call toll-free 877-886-3653. Again, that's 877-886-3653. GoBerkey.com, home of the Berkey Guy.
Springtime is save big time at Herbal Healer Academy. Long-term customers know spring is the time to stock up at herbalhealer.com. And for new customers, welcome to the web's best place to save on vitamins, minerals, and more. Log on for spring specials, including our 500 parts per million colloidal silver, all sizes on sale. Choose from Herbal Healer's great variety of weight loss products like apple cider vinegar, Hoodia and Metabolic Complex, and Pro Metabolic, all on sale now. Also, the Anti-Parasite Intestinal Freedom and Warwood Plus Complex, plus Stevia Liquid Sweetener and the Super Enzymes, all on sale for spring at herbalhealer.com. As always, we offer certificate correspondence courses in natural medicine. Enjoy same-day shipping and free online newsletter. Log on now to herbalhealer.com and click on Spring Specials to save big with our nation's leader in supplying quality natural medicine and education since 1988, Herbal Healer Academy.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
The question being about UFO sightings, similar to what Kenneth Arnold saw in the days before the case. We're talking to Kevin Randle, author of The Government UFO Files. Let's continue with this discussion about what Leonard Stringfield saw.
He sees the three objects out close to the airplane, and the engine starts to sputter, and the pilot comes over the air and tells them, we may have to ditch here because our engines are beginning to run erratically. And these objects moved off, and the engines began to run perfectly. So now we've got Len Stringfield, very credible man, telling us of an electromagnetic effect of an airplane in September of 1945, and we know how that translates through the UFO field. So there are things like that scattered through it. What I was looking for was something specifically like March, April, May, and June, prior to Arnold talking about disc-shaped objects, but I can find stuff earlier than that talk about disc-shaped objects and formations of objects. But there's something else that relates to Arnold. If you look at the original drawing he made for the Air Force, or for the Army Air Forces at the time, which is available in the Project Blue Book files, you see it's kind of a heel-shaped object with a little bit of a scallop at the end, not a whole lot, but that kind of a blunt end type thing like you'd see on the heel of a shoe. Just days, 2 weeks later, a fellow named William Rhodes takes a photograph of an object over Phoenix, Arizona, July 7th, 1947. And what does the object look like? It looks like a heel-shaped object. It looks exactly what Arnold was talking about. Now, Arnold, because he kind of started this whole thing, he was asked by Ray Palmer, who was the editor of a science fiction magazine that got deep into the shaver mystery.
Oh, yes.
But the point is, it relates to Maury Island, and these two guys from Maury Island, which is Puget Sound area of Washington, had written to Palmer talking about their UFO sighting, which I believe to be a hoax, and that's not really the important point. The point is Palmer asked Arnold to investigate. So Arnold, this businessman from Boise, Idaho, whose big claim to fame is he saw the UFOs and he's a private pilot, is now asked to investigate a UFO sighting. He doesn't know what he's doing. So he calls a friend of his, E.J. Smith, which, by the way, is the same name of the guy who was the captain of the Titanic. But Smith was the airline pilot on a United Airlines flight on July 4th. Had seen a bunch of UFOs pacing his aircraft. Arnold knows him and calls him, so they get together in Washington to investigate this case, this Maury Island case, and they're still kind of out of their depth here. They don't know what they're doing. But Arnold had been interviewed by two guys from Hamilton Air Force Base, Brown and Davidson, two intelligence officers. And the intelligence officer, I think it was Brown, had told Arnold, if you have any questions, give me a call. So Arnold called Brown to tell him about this sighting, and Brown and Davidson took a B-25 from Hamilton. They were both qualified pilots, and they flew up to the area to talk to Arnold about this. The real point of the whole story is Arnold asked if there'd been any other sightings like his, and Brown told him about the Rhodes photos and had sketched it for him and told him what was going on there. But then Brown and Davidson, as they're going back, the airplane, fire developed in the engine, and they were killed in the accident that transpired afterwards. No evidence that a UFO shot it down, no evidence that they were carrying secret materials back from Maury Island, any of that stuff. It was just a horrible aircraft accident. The two people had bailed out and survived, so we have a good idea of what was going on there. But the real point is Brown told Arnold about the Rhodes photos as the best evidence they had at the time, and then the Air Force, or the Army Air Forces, goes to great length to discredit Rhodes by making fun of his laboratory in the backyard, and the fact he called himself the doctor, even though they could find no evidence of the doctorate. But it turns out Rhodes had held like 40 patents and was a very bright guy who'd worked for the U.S. government during the Second World War and was given the Navy wanted to get more prestige, so they gave a series of tests to the engineers working for them, and if you scored so high on it, you were given the equivalency of a master's degree, and if you scored higher, you were given the equivalency of a PhD, so Rhodes had one of these equivalent PhD things. So it wasn't like he was completely making it up. There was some documentation to support that, even though it's kind of a shaky PhD type thing. But Rhodes is a very credible guy, and the government worked very hard to discredit him. And the other interesting thing is when he was first interviewed by government officials, he was an FBI agent and a CIC agent, an Army intelligence guy. And the Army intelligence guy, of course, is dressed in civilian clothes as is the FBI guy. And he says to the FBI guy, "Don't tell him I'm Army intelligence." This is all documented in the government file. So we show sort of the duplicity there, that the Army didn't want the people to know that they were investigating the UFO sightings as they were with Rhodes, and they had the perfect foil. I mean, the FBI guy shows his credentials and says, "I'm Agent so-and-so, and this is my partner, guy working with me," and they just went on from that. Special Agent so-and-so, who happened to be not a special agent of the FBI, but a special agent of the counterintelligence.
There you go.
Is that convoluted enough for you?
Very. I still haven't found the cases that are similar to Arnold's before Arnold, though, after all that.
Well, and that's the exact same problem I have. I can find some much earlier, especially with the Foo Fighter stuff out of World War II, and you go back even further than that, you can find disc-shaped objects. But the document cases where they reported the thing in some arena prior to Arnold, I have not been able to find in a number of stories. And there was one from a newspaper editor in Idaho, I think. After Arnold's sighting broke, he wrote his own story and said, "This is something I saw the month prior." So it was before Arnold, but it's not documented till after Arnold.
Right, and I think there was a case in Oregon and maybe Northern California that was right around that same week time period. I'm not sure if it was several days.
There's a whole bunch of those, and the Blue Book files have some of them. That estimate of the situation that went to Wright Field in July of 1947 that spawned the Twining letter. There were 18 cases. Arnold chronologically is the fifth case they look at. So there's like 4 cases prior to that where they're talking about similar things, and it's pilots who've seen them, and those are in the Project Blue Book files, or maybe not. I think they're mentioned, but sometimes the case is missing. But, I mean, we know what the cases were, so there are some cases. The problem is we can't document them specifically prior to Arnold. They're saying, well, I saw this before Arnold, but I didn't report it because I didn't think anybody would believe me. So we've got a number of those sorts of things. Once we get beyond Arnold, in just days after Arnold, we get a lot of disc-shaped craft. But we got a lot of other stuff, too.
Well, the question, of course, one would raise here, the skeptic, is if those sightings occurred after Arnold's, then somehow Arnold's sighting, the description, influenced them regardless of the reality.
Yes, and the other side of that coin is anything that was seen in the sky, any aerial phenomenon, regardless of the shape, was called a flying saucer. So there's a number of cases, if you look at them, they're talking about cigar-shaped craft, or they're talking about glowing balls or ball-shaped objects, things like that. In Portland, Oregon, I think over the July 4th weekend, there was a series of sightings by both civilians and police officers at several different locations over a matter of hours, and they described the object as looking like a dime. So it's a flat object, circular, but it's not really saucer-shaped as we think of the classic saucer. But everything, whether it was cigar-shaped or whatever it looked like, was labeled as a flying saucer after Arnold made that statement, or after the press picked up on flying saucer.
So how do you separate the reality from the possible fantasy? That's a question. We have a lot more to cover, and we have some questions from our listeners of our guest, Kevin Randall. This is one of the many thousands of books he's written. I understand he is fighting it out with Brad Steiger to be the most prolific author of paranormal books on the planet. Since Steiger is probably older, well, we don't want to get into that. The book is called The Government UFO Files, The Conspiracy of Cover-Up. And we're going to look more into what may or may not be covered up. Kevin Randall, again, is the guest with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Independently leading the way for the nation. Compelling talk for every political persuasion. We are GCN.
Graphic Converter is the image manipulation tool for the rest of us. It does not use any database. You get full control of all your files. Want to view the images of a folder? Drag it into Graphic Converter and a powerful browser opens up to show your image files. You could use it for slideshows. You could use it to import images from digital cameras or from scanners. Need to do some image editing? You can do that too in Graphic Converter. Also print catalogs. Convert from so many formats I can't even list them. Download now to see if Graphic Converter is good for you, like 1.5 million other users. Guess what? You could save money when you buy Graphic Converter. Use the coupon code Night Owl. Use the coupon code Night Owl to get a special price for Graphic Converter. Go to lemkesoft.com. That's Lemke soft.com. Lemkesoft.com. Lemke soft.com.
We live in a complicated society. Stressful issues are always popping up. Have you ever been treated unfairly by someone? Have you ever been overcharged for a repair? Have you ever signed a contract or a document? Worried about identity theft? How many times have you been in those unique situations where you just wanted to call an attorney to find out if you're right or wrong, or what your legal rights are? But every time you think about calling an attorney, what do you think about first? That's right. Who do you call, and how much will it cost? Our friends at Legal Shield have found a solution. With a nationwide network of 6,900 attorneys who average over 19 years of experience, Legal Shield's law firms take over 40,000 calls per week helping their members. For less than $20 per month, you can have access to Legal Shield on everything from the trivial to the traumatic. Let Legal Shield stand up for your rights at lsprotection.com. That's lsprotection.com. Or call 855-340-SAVE, 855-340-7283.
Results will vary from case to case.
What good is a Big Berkey water filter?
We get that question a lot here at BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com. And in a word, the answer is protection. Protection from water main breaks, E. coli contamination, environmental chemical spills, pesticide runoff, chlorine taste and smell, and all forms of fluoride. Plus, Big Berkey water filters are the original gravity water filter system and most trusted on the market for a reason. Tested by multiple independent NSF EPA certified labs, they are the gold standard in water purification. At only 1.7 cents a gallon, a single set of filters can last for 5 to 10 years. That means big savings. Big Berkey, the one that's powerful enough to purify stagnant pond water. Get a Big Berkey today at BigBerkeyWaterFilters.com. GCN listeners receive 5% off all ceramic filter systems. Visit our website or call 1-877-99-BERKEY. That's 877-99-BERKEY. Big Berkey Water Filters, for the love of clean water.
Question: could too many GMO foods and toxins be overloading your digestive and immune systems? Answer: yes. If you're searching for a powerful detox that's gentle enough to use every day, use Pro EM1 from Terraganics. Pro EM1 is a powerful liquid probiotic that uses good bacteria to suppress pathogens and gently eliminate toxins from your body. A healthy digestive system will cleanse and remove toxins, support weight loss, improve absorption of food nutrients, and aid in controlling yeast and other infections. Pro EM1 is made with only non-GMO and certified organic ingredients, has no preservatives, and is dairy, soy, wheat, and gluten-free. Pro EM1 is the key to your digestive health. Order Pro EM1 Daily Probiotic Cleanse at Terraganics.com, spelled Terraganix.com, or call toll-free 866-369-3678. That's 866-369-3678. Also available through Amazon Prime. Pro EM1 from Terraganics. Life's getting better.
This is Jacques Vallée. You're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
All right. So let's look here more about the possible cover-up. So a lot of information is out there. Do you think, Kevin Randall, that the government has guilty knowledge of the actual solution to the so-called UFO enigma?
Absolutely. I think they picked up the answer in early July 1947 when the thing crashed at Roswell. I think if you take a look at the history, which we now have connected to the Foo Fighters, it's not a separate entity. It's all part of the same ongoing thing. But if we look at that, we see on July 8th, the Army announces they have a flying saucer. 3 hours later, they're saying, "No, it's a weather balloon. The guys in Roswell just overreacted. It's a weather balloon." And so nobody's talking about that. But the very next day, July 9th, 1947, you get newspaper articles that say the Army and Navy moved today to suppress stories of flying saucers whizzing through the atmosphere. Why suddenly on July 9th did they care about us studying stories of flying saucers whizzing through the atmosphere when in the 2 weeks after Arnold, they didn't care? There's all kinds of stories where they're interviewing military people, and they're saying, well, we don't know what it is. It's not one of ours. It's not one of our research projects. It might be this. It might be that. There's all kinds of stories from scientists making claims about what flying saucers might be. All of that's going on, and suddenly on July 9th, the Army and the Navy moved to start suppressing the stories, to cut it down, which, by the way, is the same thing the Swedish government and the Finnish government did in 1946 with the ghost rockets. Eventually, the number of reports in the newspaper reached a critical mass, and the government tried to suppress the stories and asked the newspapers to stop reporting them. So after July 9th, 1947, you have a great drop-off on the number of stories printed about UFOs in the newspaper. I think indirectly that shows us that they have, as you put it, guilty knowledge of what the flying saucers are.
Well, in the sense of knowing what they are, do they know where they come from, or is it just something unknown that we cannot put our hands on?
I believe that they know they're extraterrestrial. We now know that they're not interplanetary. I think in 1947 the discussion was interplanetary, and the two culprits in that were Mars and Venus. And of course, we know Venus is really, really hot, and the lead would melt on the surface, which explains why nobody's really put a spacecraft on the surface of Venus to transmit it for very long, because it melted. But in looking at Mars, we know pretty well that there's nothing on Mars either. So you're looking at interstellar distances.
I remember, Kevin, reading the early books from Donald Kehoe, where he was talking so much about the possibility of Mars.
Yes, and everybody was looking at the interplanetary solution to it. That was because our knowledge of Mars and Venus was much more limited than it is today. So we're not talking interstellar. It's clearly that if these are structured craft built somewhere, they're built outside the solar system, and have come into the solar system from one of these other star systems. But we have no real clues. The only thing that's ever come up was the Barney and Betty Hill star map. But our knowledge of astronomy, as it's grown, shows that some of the assumptions made by Marjorie Fish, as the woman who identified the Zeta 1, Zeta 2 reticuli system as where the aliens that abducted Betty Hill came from. I think a lot of the information she used is now horribly out of date, and we need to revisit that to see if we can narrow it down. But the answer to the question is, all I can say with any certainty is that they're from outside the solar system. I don't know where. And that's the other thing. I don't know if it's, is it easier to travel great distances once you've mastered the speed of light barrier, or is it, do the distances make a great difference? So you'd assume that the UFOs come from our galactic neighborhood as opposed to clear across the galaxy or something like that. And I don't have an answer. All I know is, in our society, for me to go to California from where I live, I have to fly 90 minutes in the wrong direction to reach a hub, and then fly 90 minutes back to the point where I started to get to Los Angeles, where if I'm going from New York to Los Angeles, I can do it much quicker. The analogy, of course, I don't know if the analogy works really well, but it just kind of thing. It's easier to go coast to coast than it is from the Midwest to one of the coasts.
Let's go back to the government secrecy for a moment. Okay.
Okay.
So they know in 1947, having captured a spacecraft at Roswell, what's going on. Even if they're not at all certain where they come from precisely, they know this is something that is not of this world. How do you keep the secret for over 60 years?
The answer is Aztec, but I'll get to that in a minute. Aztec, New Mexico. But I'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah, I'm very curious about what you're going to add about that. Yes.
The thing is, in 1947, once they've picked up the craft, they have no clue as to what's going on. They now know. They know that it's alien. They know it's from outside the Earth's atmosphere, but they don't know if it's the beginning of an invasion force. They don't know if it's a threat to national security. They don't know if it's benign. They don't know anything. All they know is they've got one, and it's clearly not from Earth. So they are lucky that the thing fell in the desolate wastes of New Mexico, 70 miles from Roswell, for example, they're able to suppress the media because it is not nearly as argumentative then as it is today, or adversarial, I guess would be a better word, as it is today. And when they asked people to keep things quiet, they pretty much did. The other thing is they controlled the witnesses. Mac Brazel found the thing. Well, he's in Roswell being held by the military. Jesse Marcel, who went out and picked up the stuff, he's in Fort Worth at 8th Air Force Headquarters, so the press can't find him. The sheriff tells anybody who calls, I'm working with the boys out at the base, you need to talk to them. So they're able to suppress the information in 1947. Today's environment, they'd never get away with it unless the press for some reason liked the administration, in which case they don't get quite as in their face as they would for some others. But that's another problem. So in 1947, they don't know what's going on. They're able to control the flow of information because of the situation that happened. In 1952, a book's published called Behind the Flying Saucers, and it's alleged that there was a crash near Aztec, New Mexico. At the same time, I guess the book came out in 1950. In 1952, in True Magazine, there was an expose of that story done by a reporter for the San Francisco Chronicle, where he kind of took the story of the Aztec crash apart and set it at the feet of two con men who eventually were arrested in Colorado for some sort of confidence scheme. In fact, Isaac Newton, Newton.
Silas Newton.
Silas Newton, thank you. Silas Newton had a long history of arrests for con games going back into the 1930s.
Let me just interrupt for a second.
Okay.
Our listeners want to hear more about this. There was a debate on the Paracast with Kevin Randall and with, of course, Scott Ramsey, who's co-author of a book that argues in favor of Aztec. Please go on.
But the validity of Aztec really isn't important here. What is important is the expose written by J.P. Kane in the San Francisco Chronicle pretty well took apart the Aztec case, at least in the belief of all the people in UFOs. So nobody in the UFO community wanted to talk about UFO crashes. So if you had the story of a UFO crash, it was pretty well shelved. Nobody wanted to talk to it. NICAP, one of the big civilian organizations, they didn't even want to hear about occupants for the most part. APRO, the other one, at least got into the occupants and the abductions, but they didn't want to have anything to do with UFO crashes. So nobody's talking about UFO crashes at all. So nobody's looking into those stories with any kind of depth except at Aztec, and that would appear periodically, and somebody'd look at it, and then somebody else would say, no, it's all a hoax.
So is Aztec a smokescreen for Roswell?
It turned out that way. I don't think it originally was intended that way, but it became a smokescreen. And I remember when the Roswell incident came out in the 1980 and seeing the book, and thinking to myself, oh, this is just Aztec repackaged. And so I didn't even look at it until CUFOS asked me to participate in their investigation of the Roswell case because they wanted someone with a military background, because a lot of the witnesses were ex-military, and they thought I might bring some insight into the military mind and maybe would relate to these guys better than a civilian would.
We're going to have more insights from Kevin Randall on the other side. With Gene and Chris, you're in
the Paracast.
Minds think alike. The network for the independent-minded. The Genesis Communications Network. GCN.
First came Attack of the Rockoids, and it was a critically acclaimed success. And now there's The Coming of the Protectors. A former military intelligence man is contacted by a space woman in a dream that turns out to be a nightmare because evil forces on our distant planet are planning to conquer the Earth. This is gripping science fiction of the classic kind. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Find out more at rockoids.com. That's Rockoids, ROCKOIDS.com.
So here's what happened. I was placing an order online. The site went down. It took hours before it returned, but I had already placed the order with another company. If your site goes down, you could lose business. And if you have a business or personal site, you'll want to know it's easy to run and it will stay online. At iWeb, your site is hosted on one of the most reliable networks in the world. Talk to a sales rep at iWeb.com. Use the promo code TechNightOwl for a special discount.
A sudden change in the wind. The day grows dark as ominous clouds move in and lightning begins to carve arcs in the sky. And you realize you are not prepared.
I am telling you to take cover.
The number of intense storms is increasing exponentially in the U.S. Tornadoes, hurricanes, flooding, and droughts are happening with greater magnitude and frequency. If you are choosing to rely on the government to save you,
And no one's coming to help them.
you could be dead wrong. The first step towards self-reliance in the face of disaster is a visit to MyPatriotSupply.com. There you'll find the absolute best prices on storable foods, non-GMO seeds, emergency water filtration devices, and so much more. All orders over $49 qualify for free shipping in the lower 48. Visit us online or call 866-229-0927. That's 866-229-0927 and speak to one of our preparedness advisors today. Remember, before it's time to survive, it's time to prepare. MyPatriotSupply.com.
Don't complain about your cable bill going up and up and up. Do something about it. Grab a pencil and jot down this special number, 1-855-905-MyTV. The more cable TV rates go up, the better digital satellite TV looks. Say goodbye to the cable guy and get more of your favorite channels in 100% digital quality for less money. Call 1-855-905-MyTV. Sign up for packages starting as low as $19.99 and there's no equipment to buy. You get free HD TV upgrade, a free DVR upgrade, and free professional installation. You control what you watch when you watch it. Record your favorite shows, pause and rewind live TV, even skip the commercials. Watch local channels too. At just $19.99, what are you waiting for? Pull out your major credit or debit card. Call 1-855-905-MyTV. 1-855-905-MyTV. Say goodbye to the cable guy. Cut costs and get more. 1-855-905-MyTV. 1-855-905-MyTV.
A little over a year ago, I began to do a lot of research into why, even though I had a pretty good-sized meal, that I was still starving. And my research led me to a well-known fact that most of the soils that we grow our crops on here in the United States and across the industrialized world are almost completely depleted of almost all of the key minerals and trace elements that our bodies need to rebuild themselves, fight off cancer, and be healthy. I then searched out the best vitamin and mineral company out there and discovered Youngevity. The Youngevity products are designed to give you the real nutrition you need, and once you've got that, you don't have to eat as much to be satisfied. I've lost 37 pounds in 2 months, simply getting the vitamins and minerals I need. Check it out for yourself. It's incredible. Go to InfoWarsTeam.com today and order your first canister of Beyond Tangy Tangerine Complete Multivitamin Mineral Complex Dietary Supplement. That's InfoWarsTeam.com.
This is Jerome Clark, author of the UFO Encyclopedia and other books. You're listening to the Paracast.
Interviewing Kevin Randle is so easy. I just say, how about? And he answers the question. Okay, so we're exploring what evidence the government might have about UFO reality. We're into Roswell and Aztec, and let's have you go on, Kevin Randle.
Well, the point simply was that because of the expose done by J.P. Kane of the Aztec crash back in 1952, UFO researchers and UFO organizations didn't want to hear about UFO crashes. Once the Roswell incident was published, there wasn't a great flood to that. I think the real key to begin the investigations of UFO crashes was Len Stringfield's, I think it was 1978 UFON paper, where he actually mentioned Jesse Marcel, the air intelligence officer from Roswell, talking about the crash there. And then, of course, the book came out, and then CUFOS learned that there was still a lot of witnesses who had not been interviewed or not been contacted, or a possibility of additional witnesses. And Don Schmidt and I began the investigation into the case in 1989. But up to that point, nobody's really talking about this except in a very limited fashion. So that one of the ways they kept the secret was, the secret was kept, is we sort of kept it ourselves, simply not believing that there would be a UFO crash or any evidence. And it was Roswell that kind of turned all of that around because you had so many witnesses. Colonel Blanchard, the commander of the 509th Bomb Group, every member of his staff, his primary staff, in Roswell in 1947, with a single exception, talked about this thing being alien. Jesse Marcel said, it was something that came to Earth, but it was not from Earth. The Provost Marshal, Edwin Easley, told me that it was extraterrestrial. I said to him in a phone interview or a phone conversation, are we following the right path? And Easley says, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, we think it was extraterrestrial. And Easley says, well, let me put it this way, that's not the wrong path. In essence, telling me, we're on the right path. Patrick Saunders, who was the base adjutant, on the flyleaf of one of the books that I had written, the flyleaf talks about how they covered the whole thing up. Saunders wrote, this is the truth, and I never told anybody about it, and signed his name to it, and sent it off to a friend who sent me a Xerox copy of that. So every member of Blanchard's staff who we were able to interview said the thing was alien. But nobody was talking about that from 1947 because Ramey, the commander of 8th Air Force, who said it was a weather balloon, everybody accepted that answer and continued to march. Aztec came along, and it was thoroughly debunked in 1952 to everybody's satisfaction at that time, and so nobody wants to talk about UFO crashes. And that's the way this thing stayed buried for so long. Interestingly, in the Project Blue Book files, you'll find any number of crash reports from 1947. They're all hoaxes. I mean, one guy found a little 6-inch disc, for example. They're all pretty much hoaxes. There's no reference to Roswell in that, but that was a UFO sighting. It was front-page paper. You'd think there'd be a file on Roswell in the Project Blue Book files, but there's not. The only reference I've ever found in the Project Blue Book files to Roswell was in the middle paragraph in a 3-paragraph story in part of another file that said that a blistering rebuke had been issued to Walter Haut for his press release the day before. So we know it's a reference to Roswell in this newspaper clipping, but there's no case file for Roswell, yet there are for some of these other UFO crash hoaxes.
Let's move beyond that a little bit because we've covered Roswell over and over again. This is 2014, okay?
Yes, it is.
All right. So now that we're sitting here in 2014, and the secret was found out in 1947, where is the Roswell spaceship? Is it secreted away in a dustbin in Warehouse 13? Are they still looking over it? Are they trying to reverse engineer the technology? What about the pilots? Where are they today, and who's keeping the secret today?
I think the secret is kept by a very small number of bureaucrats. I think as our technology develops, we apply it to the craft or the pieces of the craft or whatever we have. We apply our technology to the alien bodies to see what we can learn about their biology, and we do it as our technology develops. We know, based on the evidence from 1947, that everything went to Wright Field, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. General Exxon, who was at Wright-Patterson at the time, said that one of the bodies had gone to Lowry in Denver, because Lowry at the time was the Army's mortuary service, and they were looking for a way to preserve the bodies because you assume that you have unique biological samples and you're not going to get any more. So you want to preserve them as best they can, and they figured they sent it, according to Exxon, to Lowry for that sort of experimentation. Where the stuff is today, I couldn't tell you. I've heard a rumor that the Navy has an island base out in the Pacific where all this stuff is stored. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense because that would be the easiest way to keep it secure because nobody's going to be sneaking up on an island to take a look at it. The people there are going to be, you would assume, well-trained, and they would have limited knowledge of what was going on except for a small number of people. But I don't know. Once it got to Wright Field, we really don't have a good idea of where the stuff went. But you have to assume that we continue to apply our technology to it as it goes forward.
So how do we unearth the secret? And the second question would be, does the White House know? Or is the president out of the loop? He's just a temporary resident.
I think the president is out of the loop, but the only reason is there are much more pressing issues on his plate. And if something happened, he would be told. And I know of an example of something like this. There was something called Operation Solo. This was a guy who'd been a communist in the 1930s, an American who'd been a communist in the 1930s, and realized as he learned more about the Soviet Union that the communism ideal was not being translated well in Soviet Union, and he flipped to the other side and became an FBI informant. But he was so respected by the Soviets that he's on the inside in the Soviet Union. He's now being run by the FBI. He goes to the Soviet Union repeatedly. He's told all kinds of interesting things that he brings back and gives to the FBI because that's his job. The operation was run out of the New York office, and most of the agents in the New York office didn't know about this operation. The president didn't know about it, and the only time they told a president about it was Gerald Ford, and he had just become president after Nixon had resigned. He was about to meet with the Soviet premier, and he was worried about how well he would do, so the FBI briefed him on Operation Solo, which was this wonderful operation giving us all kinds of inside information about the operations in the Kremlin and what is going on in the Soviet Union. But the president wasn't told routinely because it wasn't necessary for the president to know that to do his job. And I think that's where the UFO stuff falls. It's something that's, really, really interesting. And if the president wanted to find out, he could because he's the president. But I don't think he's routinely briefed on it because it is not necessary for him to know this stuff to do his job properly.
So what do we do? What do we peasants do here who have been ranting about UFOs or whatever they're called for all these years? How do we persuade the powers that be to reveal their guilty knowledge?
We're never going to persuade them. There is no motivation for them to tell us. And it doesn't matter how close we get, they're not going to tell us. The only way it's going to happen is if the UFOs, the alien creatures land and say, here we are, and there's no way to deny it. But what we can do, and this is the thing I found interesting by going through the files and the documents, is we can uncover some of this stuff. For example, we learned about Project Moondust because the State Department, in a FOIA request, released some UFO-related documents that referenced Moondust, which they shouldn't have done, but they did. But here's the thing that just cracks me up. As I was working on the book, I was looking for a sighting in the 1960 range, and as I was scanning by it, I thought I saw the words Moondust in the Project Blue Book files. So when I went back, I found 4 cases in the 1960s labeled Moondust. I found a document that tells me that Moondust began in 1957. It was dated December of 1957. It says this project recently created, obviously because of Sputnik, now exists for the recovery of information, Project Moondust. So there was a reference to Moondust and Moondust cases in the Project Blue Book files. And as far as I know, nobody ever made that connection before. I found it accidentally by looking for something else. So the point is we need to look at all the documentation that is available, and it's available in a lot of different places, and see what we can uncover by that. We learned the name of Moondust. We learned that Moondust had a UFO component. We learned that Moondust transcended Project Blue Book. So when Blue Book ended, Moondust kept going, and part of the Moondust mission was a UFO investigation. When the code name was compromised in the mid-1980s, they changed the code name and kept going. And we know this because Robert Todd filed a FOIA request, and they told him the new name is properly classified. So there was no need to tell him. So we know that all that changed was the code name. So we need to keep looking at that stuff and seeing all these little nuggets that we can find inside the files with the documentation and say, here we go. Here's documentation that shows this. And you can look at this document. You can get it yourself through FOIA, which, by the way, you can't do with MJ12. But if you FOIA the State Department for Moondust, they will send you documents with Moondust on it. I found in the Project Blue Book files.
Let's go into our break. Oh, boy. It's getting interesting. More by the second with Kevin Randall and Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Not just an alternative to the mainstream media. We're the premier independent talk radio network. We are GCN.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. If you'd like to listen to GCN programs on the go, I have great news. GCN has created a Droid and iPhone application, and it's free. Just as easy as going to GCNlive.com, click on the banner, and download. Before you know it, you'll be listening to your favorite hard-hitting GCN shows, live or on demand, right on your Droid or iPhone, 24/7 and on the go. So download the Droid and iPhone app free by clicking on the banner at GCNlive.com. Thanks again for listening to GCNlive.com. Again, that's GCNlive.com. We the people grow cotton, weave fabric, engrave ink, embed strips and fibers to protect from counterfeit, then carting to a private bank, having it lent back at interest, forcing taxes to service debt. This capitalism, or was Jefferson correct when stating a central bank issuing the public currency is a greater menace to the liberties of the people than a standing army? Hi, Ted Anderson. I'm placing a free silver dollar in a book that explains our monetary system. Call for your copy, 800-686-2237. It's time to understand the system. Call 800-686-2237. That's 800-686-2237.
Today is an important day. It's your day to be ready, take care of your family, and buy your emergency food supply from the Freeze Dry Guy. Because today, the Freeze Dry Guy introduces our Mountain House and Packaway 1-month food supply. Today, get the Freeze Dry Guy's 30-day premium unit, normally $364, sale priced at $263. Save $101. Buy 2 cases, normally $727, sale priced at $506. Save $222. Or choose 3 30-day premium units, normally $1,091, now only $748. Save $343 from the Freeze Dry Guy. These premium units are packed with the highest quality Mountain House entrees, meats, vegetables, and Packaway brand freeze-dried pineapple and dehydrates, such as milk, ABC stew, and rolled oats, 289 half-cup servings. Go to freezedryguy.com or call 866-404-3663. That's freezedryguy.com or call 866-404-3663. Free shipping to the lower 48. Hurry, our Mountain House and Packaway 1-month supply sale ends soon. So call now, 866-404-3663.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
What I'm seeing here, Kevin Randall, to kind of cut this short a little bit, that is that there may be a small agency that has the ultimate secret. We understand that. But that information does leak out. They can't control all of it. It's just so sprawling, the government, there's no way. So you do have the pieces of a puzzle. If you can only assemble the pieces, maybe you would know the secret before there's even some kind of final revelation.
Well, one of the problems we run into is the skeptics. And one of them, I think in a comment on my blog just recently said, he wouldn't believe they were aliens even if he saw the craft and the bodies. And so we have to put up with that sort of thing as well. So that helps keep the secret. I've often said that in some of the great hoaxes that have been exposed in the UFO field that helps create this idea there's nothing to it. I've often said if I was the guy running the operation to supply the disinformation or keep the thing secret, I'd take credit for all this with my bosses. See what I was able to do? I was able to divert attention in this direction. So it's all of that going on. But as we look at the information, we can gather the testimony from very credible witnesses. They often give us clues as to where to look for documentation, and we can sometimes find that documentation. And so we have to be able to provide that so that other people can follow in our footsteps. The Ramey memo comes to mind immediately. That's the document that Ramey is holding in one of the pictures taken in his office in 1947. And there's attempts to read this based on blow-ups and manipulation of the photographs to read what that document actually says, which could turn out to be the smoking gun. And I've said, but what we have to do is make sure that we provide all the information on how we got to that point, if it does lead to that conclusion, so that everybody else can follow us and see that we have done nothing to alter it. You can do the same thing by following these steps, and this information is available. We have to be available, in essence, for peer review of our research, that others can follow in our footsteps and verify what we say, what we're saying.
There you go. No way to do it, it sounds like. Kind of frustrating.
No, it's not. There's no way to do it. There's people we're not going to be able to convince no matter what we have and what we present in evidence. But what I'm saying is the evidence is out there, but we just have to be a little bit more diligent in our collection of that evidence and make sure that the steps we took to get to that evidence can be followed by somebody else. So if I present a document to you and I say this comes from such and such and proves such and such, you can go to that agency and get the same documents. And that's the point with MJ-12. You can't do that. You can't go to a government agency that inadvertently released the documents and they say, yes, this is a document we hold. You can do that with Moondust, for example. You can do this with other secret stuff. So we have to be able to provide the steps to get to the conclusions that we have drawn so that others can see it independently of what we've done.
Well, Kevin, I have a quick question here for some of our first-time listeners and neophytes into this particular subject. Project Moondust. Now, wasn't that tasked with the recovery of downed objects? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Project Moondust was developed to recover returning space debris of foreign manufacturer or unknown origin. Foreign manufacturer clearly labels Soviet Union and now would be all the other space agencies around there. And foreign unknown origin, that's the UFO component. When we look at Moondust files, we can see the UFO component in there. And that was one of the things that the FOIA request did, is it was State Department files under Project Moondust that talked about UFO sightings in other parts of the world and the recovery of objects. Most of the time, the objects clearly are of terrestrial manufacture. But we've got some very good sightings that come out of Moondust. The 4 sightings I found in Project Blue Book are really crappy sightings. Basically, they could be meteors seen in the distance very quickly from the descriptions you see in the files. But it shows the UFO component. So Moondust had a UFO component. It had a number of missions. They deployed a number of times. Now, since we've got into this, Senator Jeff Bingaman of New Mexico had queried the Air Force about Project Moondust. And he was told at the time that there was no such project. It never existed. When Moondust documents were sent to the Air Force, I mean, clearly from the Department of State, so that there was a provenance for the documents, the Air Force wrote back and said, we'd like to amend our last statement. Yes, there was a Project Moondust, but we never deployed it. Well, other documents show that it did deploy. So, again, what we found is government duplicity in this, government lying about what Moondust did, where it went, if it even existed, and we've been able to document all that. So if you wanted to follow in my footsteps, I'd say, well, you've got to take a look at FOIA the stuff from the State Department. You have got to look at the Project Blue Book files, and it's the cases around September of 1960, I believe. So you can go to the Blue Book files, and you can look it up, and you can see the Project Moondust cases yourself. So you can follow my footsteps independently and get to the same place.
Well, that brings me to a really good question that's been posed by JPW in Wisconsin at forum.theparacast.com, where you can ask questions of our guests. And this is a perfect lead-in to the question. Mr. Randall has lived through many changes throughout his career. If he's willing to wade into a potentially political puddle of mud, I'd like to hear about his broader thoughts on the current lack of transparency on the part of the U.S. government and the steep decline in the public's trust in government. How we've arrived at this point, and maybe UFO secrecy could be commented within this context.
Well, that's a wide-ranging question, but I will say...
Well, it's just basically saying, hey, public trust in the government has really degraded, and, we have this lack of transparency now.
Well, yes, and to address the lack of transparency, FOIA used to require a response in 10 working days. So you file a FOIA request, they were required to respond. Now, oftentimes the response was, we have your request, we're looking at it. They've now complied with the letter of the law, but they haven't really told you anything. And then sometime later, you might get some documents that relate to that. In the age of email and the internet, I have filed some FOIA requests with military organizations and gotten a response quickly from them over the internet, answering my questions, especially if they were simple questions. On the other hand, I filed FOIA requests with the Secretary of the Air Force and gotten absolutely no response, none whatsoever, which means FOIA simply has no real teeth left anymore. So now we have the lack of transparency. They're just not afraid of not responding to you. And I think this whole thing is an outgrowth of really the Vietnam War, where there was a very adversarial relationship between the government and the press, and some of the things that you could see on the TV clearly were not related to what the government was saying, and moves on to Watergate, where President Nixon was saying, well, I'm not a crook, I'm not involved, we didn't do this, we didn't do that, and it comes out, well, they did do all of that, to ongoing things today, where the president or the administration or the government says one thing, and it turns out something completely different is true. And you've got it on both sides of the aisle. You've got the Congress, whose most congressmen seems to be their mission is to get reelected, and they don't worry about what's happening to the country. So you can see all of that for yourself, that the transparency in the government and the mission of the government now is to sort of perpetuate itself, as opposed to do what governments were supposed to do when they were created back, well, our government 200 and some odd years ago.
Well, what's happening now is people in Congress and the Senate, they spend a lot of their time fundraising because they won't be reelected unless they get enough cash. And sometimes it costs a lot of money, though, of course, in a strange turn of events, Congressman Eric Cantor raised $5 million. His opponent raised maybe 100,000 or 200,000, and the opponent won, and the polls were all off. So that was a big mess. But, so it's become a money machine. They're a money operation. And the other question I'm going to ask you when we get back from our break is there private industry involvement in keeping the UFO secret? Because I think that would do better. There's no government bureaucrat to leak the information. You don't know where it is because some private corporation has it. Kevin Randle joins us. The book is The Government UFO Files with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Neighbors, are you tired of dealing with a slow web hosting provider? Well, check out A2 Hosting and their screaming fast Swift server platform. They even have SSDs that load pages 300% faster than the competition. Ready to give your site a speed boost? Well, tell you what, neighbors, head on over to a2hosting.com. That's A2, that's number 2, a2hosting.com. Check out their Prime hosting account. And get this, neighbors, they're even giving you an exclusive 25% off discount for all our listeners. 25%. And remember, their Guru Crew support team is standing by 24/7, 365 days a year to answer any of your questions. Now, to get the discount, use the coupon code GENE when you check out.
Amanda Bolsel here from Midas Resources. Today, June 10th, 2014, gold opened at $12.6110. A 1 ounce gold coin can be purchased for $13.0717, $653.59 for a half ounce, or $326.79 for a quarter ounce. Again, that's $13.0717, $653.59, and $326.79.
Hi, this is Ted Anderson. Have you ever wondered why banks, stockbrokers, investment advisors won't talk about gold IRAs? Wait a sec. Gold and silver is going up while Congress is trying to settle on the next debt increase. And there's no end to this madness. That old 401k and IRA can be converted into physical gold without tax consequences. I explained this in my book, 10 Reasons to Buy Gold. Don't let time slip away. Call for your free copy today, 800-686-2237. Get away from that Washington spin and get honest answers about gold. 800-686-2237. The book is free, 800-686-2237.
Don't complain about your cable bill going up and up and up. Do something about it. Grab a pencil and jot down this special number, 1-855-905-MY-TV. The more cable TV rates go up, the better digital satellite TV looks. Say goodbye to the cable guy and get more of your favorite channels in 100% digital quality for less money. Call 1-855-905-MY-TV. Sign up for packages starting as low as $19.99, and there's no equipment to buy. You get free HD TV upgrade, a free DVR upgrade, and free professional installation. You control what you watch when you watch it. Record your favorite shows, pause and rewind live TV, even skip the commercials. Watch local channels too. At just $19.99, what are you waiting for? Pull out your major credit or debit card. Call 1-855-905-MY-TV. 1-855-905-MY-TV. Say goodbye to the cable guy. Cut costs and get more. 1-855-905-MY-TV. 1-855-905-MY-TV.
The human body is extraordinary.
Despite all the stresses we inflict upon it, it still works hard to stay in balance. Thousands upon thousands of people rely upon Heart and Body Extract to help their body stay balanced. This excellent 100% natural herbal formula helps maintain healthy blood pressure levels, cleans arteries, promotes good circulation, balances cholesterol, and more. HB Extract, paired with healthy lifestyle choices like good nutrition and exercise, can give you a life free of pain, sickness, and fear. Recapture your youthful vitality and experience your body healing itself with the aid of HB Extract. It's extremely effective and it starts working in just days. Visit hbextract.com to learn more and to read scores of testimonials from satisfied customers. And we've never increased our price in over 10 years. That makes Heart and Body Extract as great a value now as it was the first day we sold it. A healthy heart is a happy heart. Call 866-295-5305 or go to hbextract.com.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
So my crazy quote question, Kevin Randall, on the Paracast with Gene and Chris, is whether any of this information with regard to the secret, with regard to captured spaceships such as Roswell, could that have been funneled off to private industry, which would make it basically invisible unless we knew where to look?
I will say yes. I think as you attempt to reverse engineer this, and you find out it's outside the expertise of the people you're talking to, you may attempt to find others with other expertise that might be able to give you answers. So some of it could have been funneled into private industry, but it's just a very convoluted question, and we get hints of these sorts of things, and the problem is we don't know where to look, we don't know the code names, we don't know how to access specific information. So if you don't know the code names, it's not going to be filed under UFO crash, it's going to be filed under something else. And if we don't know that code name, then we're not going to be able to find anything. And a lot of times in these FOIA requests, you get the response is the information is properly classified. But the only event that should make it properly classified would be a national security event, and that's where Maelstrom becomes important, because we're dealing with a national security event. If an outside agency, whatever that agency might be, can shut down a missile, a whole flight of Minuteman missiles at the same time so they cannot be launched, then that's a matter of national security, because you don't want the Soviets to know that it can be done and somebody figured out how to do it. So you have to take a look. You have to take a look at all of that sort of thing. But so when they say, well, that's a matter of national security, yeah, that's a matter of national security. Were UFOs involved in that? Well, there were sightings all over the darn place at the time that happened. And so UFO may have found a way through whatever method of shutting down the missile flights. It becomes a matter of national security. So those sighting events now go in a different direction.
Yeah, we won't even talk about all the cattle mutilations that occurred in the 70s around Malmstrom, right in the midst of a UFO wave.
And there's nothing in my book about the cattle mutilations, but there's stuff in my book about the Maelstrom shutdowns, including information from Robert Salas, of course, and some other people who are involved. Here's something interesting that I don't know if it's mentioned in the book, but if you all know about the RB-47 chase that took place in 1957. This was a bomber that was on a training mission over the Gulf of Mexico, flew up through Mississippi, over across Shreveport, Louisiana, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and then back to its home base. And it was paced by a UFO in a number of cases. The crew saw it. It was painted on radar, apparently painted on radar on the ground. The pilot was a guy named Lewis Chase. He was a major at the time. When you get to the Maelstrom case, the UFO officer that's working with the guys from the University of Colorado and their UFO study, same guy, Lewis Chase. He's now a lieutenant colonel. He's the UFO officer at Maelstrom Air Force Base, and he's telling some of the Colorado investigators, I can't get into that. It's national security, and that would be the missile shutdown part of it.
Wow. So he has an event occur where he's probably the ranking officer, and then he becomes an expert.
He's the ranking officer on the airplane. He's the pilot in command. He's involved with the UFO sighting, and the next thing you know, he's at Malmstrom Air Force Base as a lieutenant colonel, as the UFO officer, which is unusual because a UFO officer was normally some second lieutenant that got the job as an additional duty. They didn't have one guy assigned to it full time, but if there was a UFO sighting in the area, this poor second lieutenant or first lieutenant was normally tasked with finding it. But here at Malmstrom, the guy tasked with it was a lieutenant colonel.
Wow. And the name Chase has some interesting name game implications.
Well, yes, it does, and I was hoping we wouldn't go there.
Keep it going, Chris.
Okay, well, yeah, on that note, we'll just kind of move right along here. I have a question from Joey K22, who's been a long-time poster at forum.theparacast.com. I mean, we're talking 5 years, and this is only his 28th message at forum. At the forum here, and he's wondering if you have any examples of when conspiracy theorists have been proven correct over the past 100 years, he says, in regards to UFOs and the government. That's a good question. You'll probably have to scratch your head a little bit on that one.
Well, actually, no. The thing that springs to my mind is the Project Moondust stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, here we're alleging that there was this investigation called Moondust, and the Air Force is denying that it ever existed. And pretty soon we've got the documentation, and the Air Force saying, "Oh, yeah, it existed, but we never used it." And we have the documentation to prove that. So, in this respect, that conspiracy theory has been proven accurate.
Right, and Jeff Bingman, as you mentioned, was told that there was no such thing.
Absolutely, and so here's one that springs to mind immediately. We can look at some of the other things. Another great one would be the Colorado study published in 1969 about there being no national security implications. We made a scientific study, and there's nothing to be learned from UFOs, and we find, as the study was beginning, the Air Force sends a letter written by a lieutenant colonel named Robert Hippler telling the Condon Committee exactly what to find. We would like you to say some positive things about the Air Force investigation. We'd like to say you to say there's no national security implications. We'd like you to say that we should end the investigation so we can get out of this thing that we publicly have to investigate. And the Colorado Commission writes back and said, "Yeah, okay, we can do that." And the next thing you know, Condon is saying, in a speech in Corning, New York, I really don't think there's anything to this, but I'm not supposed to come to that conclusion for another 18 months. So
right, yeah. You shouldn't spend any more money on this. And so the government, the Air Force in particular, uses this as an excuse to stop and seize Project Blue Book. And then 6 months later, MUFON begins.
They stop public investigations, but we know it's not true because the Air Force mission is to keep our skies clear of unknown objects, so they have a mission beyond UFOs to investigate these things. But secondly, we know that Project Moondust existed at that time, so they quit Project Blue Book, but Moondust continues, and Moondust is doing some of the same stuff that Blue Book was doing. So we see the continuation of the investigation. In fact, if you go back to the very beginning, Project Sign, early on, after some 18 months or so, they issued a final report that, well, we couldn't find anything to flying saucers. We've stopped the investigation. That was a lie. They changed the name and continued as Project Grudge. When Grudge ended, they said, well, here's our final report on Grudge. We're not going to investigate anymore, and they continued with Project Blue Book. Blue Book eventually evolved into a debunking agency, a public affairs debunking agency, but they kept telling us we've stopped the investigation, but they continued on under another name. So in 1969, they said, well, we've stopped the investigation, but clearly they've continued it under Project Moondust, which we know about, until the mid-1980s. We just don't know the code name of the new project.
So that's an interesting way to get out of something. You rename it so the previous investigation doesn't exist because it's known under a new name, but if you don't know the new name, you can't find it. Oh, well. Kevin Randall wrote a book called The Government UFO Files, The Conspiracy of Cover-Up. You're on with Gene and Chris. You're in
the Paracast.
Free from the shackles of corporate America, we're the place for independent thinkers. GCN.
Graphic Converter is the image manipulation tool for the rest of us. It does not use any database. You get full control of all your files. Want to view the images of a folder? Drag it into Graphic Converter and a powerful browser opens up to show your image files. You could use it for slideshows. You could use it to import images from digital cameras or from scanners. Need to do some image editing? You can do that too in Graphic Converter. Also print catalogs. Convert from so many formats I can't even list them. Download now to see if Graphic Converter is good for you, like 1.5 million other users. Guess what? You could save money when you buy Graphic Converter. Use the coupon code Night Owl. Use the coupon code Night Owl to get a special price for Graphic Converter. Go to lemkesoft.com. That's Lemke soft.com. Lemkesoft.com. Lemke soft.com.
We all know that Berkey Water Purification Systems are the most trusted name in water filtration. As an authorized Berkey dealer for over 6 years and serving thousands of satisfied customers, the Berkey Guy offers amazing specials for Berkey water filtration systems. The Berkey Light systems include a set of self-sterilizing and recleanable black purification elements that purify water by removing chlorine, pathogenic bacteria, cysts, and parasites to non-detectable levels and remove harmful chemicals such as herbicides and pesticides. Order the Berkey Light system today, complete with 2 black Berkey elements for only $231, and the Berkey Guy will ship your order free of charge. With the purchase of a Berkey Light, the Berkey Guy is also offering a set of fluoride and arsenic filters for only $39.99. That's over 30% off the retail price. Call the Berkey Guy at 1-877-886-3653. That's 1-877-886-3653. Or order online at goberkey.com. That's goberkey.com today.
Today is an important day. It's your day to be ready, take care of your family, and buy your emergency food supply from the Freeze Dry Guy. Because today, the Freeze Dry Guy introduces our Mountain House and Packaway 1-month food supply. Today, get the Freeze Dry Guy's 30-day premium unit, normally $364, sale priced at $263. Save $101. Buy 2 cases, normally $727, sale priced at $506. Save $222. Or choose 3 30-day premium units, normally $1,091, now only $748. Save $343 from the Freeze Dry Guy. These premium units are packed with the highest quality Mountain House entrees, meats, vegetables, and Packaway brand freeze-dried pineapple and dehydrates, such as milk, ABC stew, and rolled oats, 289 half-cup servings. Go to freezedryguy.com or call 866-404-3663. That's freezedryguy.com or call 866-404-3663. Free shipping to the lower 48. Hurry, our Mountain House and Packaway 1-month supply sale ends soon. So call now, 866-404-3663.
Springtime is save big time at Herbal Healer Academy. Long-term customers know spring is the time to stock up at herbalhealer.com. And for new customers, welcome to the web's best place to save on vitamins, minerals, and more. Log on for spring specials, including our 500 parts per million colloidal silver, all sizes on sale. Choose from Herbal Healer's great variety of weight loss products like apple cider vinegar, Hoodia and Metabolic Complex, and Pro Metabolic, all on sale now. Also, the Anti-Parasite Intestinal Freedom and Warwood Plus Complex, plus Stevia Liquid Sweetener and the Super Enzymes, all on sale for spring at herbalhealer.com. As always, we offer certificate correspondence courses in natural medicine. Enjoy same-day shipping and free online newsletter. Log on now to herbalhealer.com and click on Spring Specials to save big with our nation's leader in supplying quality natural medicine and education since 1988, Herbal Healer Academy.
Hi, this is Nick Pope. You're listening to the Paracast.
So, listeners, we've been asking your questions of Kevin Randle. And his book is The Government UFO Files. You're on with Gene and Chris. Chris, any other questions we could follow through with at this point?
Well, we do have one from Bonzo4880, who just joined on Monday. And I'm not sure, Kevin, if I want to ask you this, but because I know it's going to open up a can of alien worms here. But what do you think about Dulce and Phil Schneider?
Oh my Lord! And they just did that on the. I saw that on History 2 this morning. Just saw that. I just do not believe that tale. I don't think there's any good solid evidence that his story is true. I just don't buy it. I've been in the
what about Anthony Sanchez and his Colonel X and this UFO Highway book that he released a number of years back that attempts to, I guess, jumpstart this whole underground base at Dulce scenario. Are you familiar with Colonel X and that whole scenario?
Well, here's the problem, Colonel X. Yeah, who is this guy? Was he really a military officer? We can't verify anything about him. And the sad thing I've found is we can verify military credentials of anybody. It's not that hard to do. I keep waiting.
Yeah, it's called a DD-214.
Well, not even that. If you're living wherever the hell you are, and somebody says, "Well, I'm this military guy, and I know this, that, and the other thing," you can file a request with the in St. Louis, which is where the military records are held, and they will release to you all parts of the guy's military record that are public information: awards and decorations, military schools, ranks they achieved, some very good information. So if a guy says, "Well, I was a military officer, I did this, that, and the other thing," and you write to him, he says, "Well, no, we have no record of this guy," or they say, "Yes, here is the guy's record," and it turned out he'd been a low-ranking enlisted man. Well, there's something that suggests that maybe we shouldn't accept this guy's tale. This is what happened with Robert Willingham and the crash in Del Rio in 1950. He originally said it was 1948. He then said it was 1950. Then he said it was the mid-1950s. I found in the MUFON Journal in 1968, March of 1968, it's called Skylook at the time, but on page 3 of it, there was a paragraph from this guy, and he was a CAP lieutenant colonel. Nothing about this, and the story is completely different than what he tells today. So I went to the archives in St. Louis and got his military record and found out that he'd served from December of 1945 to January of 1947, and that's his whole military service. So he couldn't have been a fighter pilot. He couldn't have been he wasn't a retired Air Force colonel. All that stuff was wrong. Well, that just kills the credibility of the story. That's something that's very simple to do, but you have to have the names of the guys to do it. So if you're talking like a Colonel X, you cannot verify the information, and if you can't verify it, your best course of action is to disbelieve it until you can find some verification from independent sources. And that's the other thing that trips us up periodically is we think it comes from independent sources, and it's all traceable back to a single source.
Well, when you says Colonel X or something, I think of Commander X from Tim Beckley, one of his house names. Colonel B, Commander X. These are just pseudonyms. So you wonder maybe he adapted it from that.
There's any number of stories that came from allegedly high-ranking military officers, and almost universally, I'm unable to verify their military service or their high ranks. Steve Wilson was another one who came out with some really great stories and said he'd been in the Air Force for 39 years. And the thing that caught me, it says, well, he had 13 good conduct medals. And I'm looking at that, and I said, well, whoever wrote this knows that you get a good conduct medal for every 3 years of service, but officers don't get them. Only enlisted people get them. So a guy who'd served for 39 years as an Air Force officer would not have 13 good conduct medals. He'd have none because they expect good conduct from the officer. So you don't get rewarded for it that way. And looking at it, there's no record of his military service. It just doesn't make any sense. And we go through this time and time again in the UFO field particularly. Or the guy's got a pseudonym. Well, there's no way to verify it. And until we can get the independent corroboration, our best course of action is to say, well, that's an interesting story, but let's see if we can verify it. And with some of these tales of hidden bases and underground bases and all that, we just cannot get the independent corroboration to verify them.
How do we combat all this tenuous kind of, vaporous information that's touted to support, the latest version of, some sort of controversial claim? This is something that is going to haunt this field forever unless we can come up with a formula with which to keep these stories, under wraps or at least out of the public eye until they can be verified. What about checks and balances in the field of ufology? Is there any hope?
No, because belief structure comes into play, as does the internet. The internet's really, really crushed any attempts at verification. I did a paper a long paper some 14 years ago in an attempt to set up a peer review among UFO researchers. And I looked at the Mantell case, Mantell being the Air National Guard pilot who was killed chasing a flying saucer. And I looked at all kinds of aspects of this. I mean, I went into apoxia and hypoxia and how it affects the human body and how long you can remain conscious at these extreme altitudes without oxygen and all these factors that played into the Mantell case, hoping to set an example. You know, here's what I did. Here's the research. What's his face up in Canada?
Earl Bruce Knapp,
Earl Bruce Knapp put it on his UFO updates for comment from our peers in the hopes of inspiring others to look at other cases in a similar fashion where we could all comment on it, as you would in a peer-reviewed journal, for example. And it worked to an extent, but nobody ever created a second paper on some other aspect of the UFO field to do the same thing. And that's one of the things we need to do is kind of come up with some way of peer reviewing stuff. But and that was kind of one of the things in the government UFO files. I tried to provide the information so that you could verify it yourselves and suggest that we need to independently verify this information before we went off on a tangent. But anybody with a computer can publish anything on the internet at any time about anything. So there's no...
Yeah, and it can go viral, much to our horror.
Immediately. And I mean, UFO footage being used today, surfacing today is virtually useless because any 12-year-old kid with a computer can produce an outstanding UFO movie. And there's little you can do to verify the circumstance unless, you know, there's a wide range of witnesses who saw it at separate locations and are not related to the initial poster of that specific piece of video. So it's very difficult to do. But the thing we have to do as serious researchers is look at this stuff and say, you know, okay, that's interesting. I don't believe it. Here's why. And usually the reason is we have no independent verification for it. And that kind of comes back to the question that was being asked. You know, what do you think of this guy and his underground bases at Dulce? And the answer is there's no independent verification for it. I know of a number of documentaries that have gone out to the Archuleta Plateau in New Mexico looking for the signs that people said were there of the tunnel entrance and all that, and they've never found anything. And, you know, serious researchers have done it. Documentary crews have done it. They've worked with the Apache Nation and just been unable to find anything to verify this. Does that mean it's not there? Well, probably it does, but the point is we have no verification for it now, so we have to look at that a little bit askance.
Oh, we're always looking askance in the UFO field. We always have to wonder whether...
skanks. I think...
You think so? Oh, well. The book is called The Government UFO Files, The Conspiracy of Cover-Up. And as you see, just going through this is like going through a swamp of information, misinformation, trying to figure out what's going on. And certainly Kevin Randall is one of the best out there to trudge through this and try to go through this and try to figure out what might be going on. Kevin D. Randall joining Gene and Chris for one more segment. You're in
the Paracast.
The nation's largest independently owned and operated talk radio network. The Genesis Communications Network. GCN.
Attack of the Rockoids has been well received by critics and readers alike. It's a thrill-a-minute story you'll never forget. A former U.S. military intelligence officer is haunted by intense dreams about a beautiful woman pleading for his help after a terrible battle in outer space. But the dreams turn out to be true and thrust him into a telepathic love affair with a woman whose faraway planet is intent on destroying the Earth. And now the gripping tale continues in The Coming of the Protectors. It's the second book of the Rockoids trilogy, a galaxy-spanning adventure that pits our hapless heroes against powerful, fanatical enemies that threaten the lives of freedom-loving beings everywhere. Attack of the Rockoids and The Coming of the Protectors. Classic science fiction at its best, available now. For more details, visit rockoids.com. That's ROCKOIDS.com.
You've talked about it for a while. Now it's time to get your family the emergency readiness pack it deserves. And there's one site to turn to, toppackgear.com. From large to small, you'll find kits for every purpose, and all of them can be customized by you. Toppackgear.com offers the best pre-built packs the internet has to offer, assembled using only high-quality products vetted by pros and chosen for the best balance of quality and value. Prepare, endure, prevail with toppackgear.com.
How many good people procrastinate? When was the last time you updated your last will and testament, your living will, and your healthcare power of attorney? If you could get these documents included with your Legal Shield membership for no additional charge, wouldn't it just make sense to have the peace of mind of owning a Legal Shield membership? Worry less and live more with lsprotection.com. That's lsprotection.com, or call 855-340-SAVE. That's 855-340-7283.
Results will vary from case to case.
This alert just came in. This special announcement is for business owners and leaders of organizations who've been waiting for the right time to build. General Steel has made it impossible to wait any longer with rock-bottom prices that could save you thousands. That's right, General Steel, America's leader in pre-engineered structures, is offering buildings at prices you will never see again. Don't miss these prices. A 50 by 100 for $35,000. You heard right. That's 5,000 square feet for $35,000. Manufacturers, if you need a larger building, try a 100 by 100 commercial building for $129,000. You can't afford to rent with these prices. Imagine a 70 by 100-foot church building for under $69,000. With the economy improving and interest rates still at historic lows, you can't afford to wait. So call 866-91-STEEL. Lock in your price now. Call 866-91-STEEL. That's 866-917-8335.
Ted Anderson telling you about Jordan Rubin's Beyond Organic Green-Fed Raw Cheddar Artesian Cheese featuring whole milk created through ancient dairy breeding, unpasteurized, untreated whole milk on the same farm the cows graze, containing natural sources of omega-3s, CLA protein, calcium, probiotics, and enzymes. I have never tasted cheese this good, and you need to try it. Contact your longevity distributor or call 877-878-4203 or go to gcnteam.com. Hi, this is Ted Anderson. Have you ever wondered why banks, stockbrokers, investment advisors won't talk about gold IRAs? They've been available since 1986, yet the financial industry won't recognize the value of gold for your retirement. Gold has outperformed paper investments, yet no word about IRAs. If you would like to have gold for your retirement, call 800-686-2237. Don't get left behind by rising inflation and low returns. Call 800-686-2237. Secure your future and call 1-800-686-2237.
This is Jerome Clark, author of the UFO Encyclopedia and other books. You're listening to the Paracast.
With Gene and Chris, we have one more segment with Kevin Randall, exploring his book, The Government UFO Files, trying to make sense. And as you see, anytime you get involved in things involving governments, it's in a swamp. What about other countries, Kevin? Are we all in this conspiracy together around the world? Would you think some second-grade dictator somewhere in some unknown country might say, you know what, I'm going to reveal the secret. I don't care about those people in the U.S. and Russia?
That's happened in the past. The Prime Minister of Grenada in the 1980s, I think, announced that he believed UFOs were real. But the problem is they don't provide any evidence. It's not necessarily a conspiracy among the governments to keep this stuff secret. It's in the national security of specific governments to keep it secret, so they just follow in that. If it was in their best interest to release the information, we'd be talking about that. Nick Pope, in his book on Rendlesham Forest with John Burroughs and Jim Peniston, for example, talk about the British study of UFOs and what their conclusions came to, and how it sort of mirrored the Condon Committee report, overlooking evidence, ignoring evidence, and that sort of thing. We've got some interesting cases out of South America. I talked to the pilot who had flown an intercept on a UFO, and he fired on it. And so I asked him the question that everybody everybody assumed, but nobody had asked him, which was, he said he fired on it without results. And I said, well, did you hit it? If you missed it, there's no results. And he said, no, he hit it. He hit the machine gun bullets, hit it, and bounced off. And so we've got some very good stuff like that. But in the United States, we're very American-centric, and so we tend not to believe that these other nations' research would be as good as ours. So we often ignore what they have to say or what the researchers have to say from these countries, and they produce some extraordinary UFO cases out of all parts of the world. We just tend to ignore them here. And here's an interesting point on the Rendlesham Forest case, the Bentwaters case, where the United States Air Force supposedly saw a UFO land in the Rendlesham Forest in Great Britain. And the United States says, well, the UFO landed on British soil, so it's not our concern. And the British said it was investigated by Americans from the base, so it's not our concern. So the two governments are fighting one another to stay away from this as much as they can, trying to palm it off on the other government. So there's a lot of that kind of nonsense going on as well.
Speaking of nonsense or not nonsense, okay, so you believe that the Roswell crash was real. Do we have any other spaceships on ice somewhere?
There are some other interesting cases. Shag Harbor, for example, in 1968, which, by the way, happened during the Condon Committee, and their investigation involved a phone call to Canada, Shag Harbor being in Canada, and deciding it was just a bunch of teenagers made a report and they weren't going to investigate it. This is an object seen in the sky, fell into Shag Harbor, created some kind of disturbance as it went down. American military forces responded at the invitation of the Canadians. Canadian military forces responded. Apparently Soviet military forces responded in some fashion. The thing was underwater for 7 or 8 days and finally left the area, so I'm sure it counts as a crash. There's a picture of the thing in the air that Don Ledger and Chris Stiles had found. They found police officers who witnesses. They found documentation from various elements of the Canadian government about this case. So here was a case where they didn't recover anything, but there's some very interesting evidence, multiple chains of evidence, including the photograph, the testimony, and the documentation. So there are things like that out there. We just need to seek them out and not sensationalize them, because we're dealing with an alien race, and that's sensational enough, I would think.
Also, I would think that at some point in time, if they've been here all these years, whether it's one race or many races, wouldn't they show some more evidence of their intent, or are we so low on the evolutionary scale that it doesn't matter to them?
I always talk about the Prime Directive from Star Trek, which was not...
Which, of course, they break all the time, like in the last Star Trek film.
Well, yeah, I just wasn't... Well, the last one counts. I'm sorry.
Star Trek Into Darkness, you don't think it counts?
And the Star Trek one before that, they reinvent the characters and all kinds of stuff. The only good part was they showed Kirk living in Iowa, which was kind of fun for us in Iowa.
Yeah, but you know what?
Well, the movie starts out with them stopping a volcano from erupting and destroying the civilization.
Well, anyway.
And in the first film, by the way, so for example, Captain Kirk's father is really Thor, the actor who plays Thor.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay, that's
really well. The thing that bugged me about that, the first movie, was Kirk is a cadet, in essence, on the Enterprise. The captain leaves to go off on his away team or whatever. He leaves